I believe we're now live. Good morning. My name is Graham Britton. I'm the monitor of Buckinghamshire. Welcome to the July meeting of the Overview and Audit Committee. Although members of the public are allowed to attend and observe in limited numbers, for health and safety reasons, we are continuing to live stream to the authority's YouTube channel. Following the meeting, a recording will continue to be available on this channel, and it is also being recorded should there be any technical difficulties. Comply with social distancing guidelines. Senior officers, including the Chief Finance Officer Jason Thelwell, Deputy Chief Osborne, and the Chief Finance Officer Mark Hemming, are joining us remotely. We will also be joined remotely by the authority's auditors, and I note that although Councillor Hussain has given his apologies, he's also going to be observing remotely. In order to facilitate the best possible experience for all those participating in the meeting and watching online, can I please ask all those participating in the meeting remotely to switch off your microphone and camera when not speaking. You will be audible and visible to all those watching the live feed of the meeting if you do not do so. If remote participants wish to speak during the meeting, please turn on your camera to indicate they wish to respond to a question or to make a comment. In the absence of an outgoing Vice Chairman, it falls to me to preside over the first item of business, which is the election of Chairman, which is agenda item 1. Are there any nominations for the position of Chairman for the year 21-22?
Yes, I'd like to propose Councillor David Carroll as Chairman of this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Bagg. Is there a seconder for that nomination?
Go on then. Yeah, I'm happy to stay within that nomination.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other nominations? There being no other seconded nominations, I confirm that Councillor Carroll is duly elected as Chairman by silence of second.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Hopefully you'll enjoy this meeting. It's probably the most committee in this organisation, so please take part in it. I'm looking forward to your contributions. The next, obviously, the item on the agenda is Vice Chairman. I'd like to propose Councillor Mahbub Hussain. Do we need a seconder?
Yes, Chairman.
Don't go for a political balance.
Yeah. Bill.
Sorry, we got
Seconded by Councillor Chapel.
no back.
Are there any other nominations?
I'll propose yourself to be able to vote.
Is there a seconder?
Sure, I'll second that, just for political balance.
That's all I need.
So can we please have a vote for the Councillor Hussain? 1, 2, 3. And for completeness, a vote for Councillor Patrick.
You disappoint me, Bill.
I confirm that
Into a constant.
I can confirm that Councillor Hussain is duly appointed as Vice Chairman.
And I do believe I had that Mahbub is tuning into the meeting.
Thank you very much for that support.
Thank you very much. Right, item 3, apologies, Katie.
Apologies in person from Councillor Hussain.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, item 4. I invite any observations, and particularly officers. Graham, have you got anything to add?
I can remark that I think Councillor Statutory requested, he expressed some concern about the use of councillors' emails from Buckinghamshire County Council and Milton Keynes Council respectively, and we just wanted to ensure that there was that didn't create any vulnerabilities.
That's correct.
To the authority system, and I did undertake to speak with the head of ICT, and he's liaised with his counterparts at both Buckinghamshire Council and Milton Keynes Council.
Just for context, we were talking about vulnerability. We were talking about people getting in and systems coming in, and we got councillors are quite a lot of people getting into our systems because we've got constituents, and I just was concerned about that, and I'm reassured that that won't be the case because none of us wants to bring a third party who's unwelcome to the organisation, to the internet, do we?
Very understandable. Thanks for that.
And I can also, the other piece of information I can convey about on that matter is that once once the WAN LAN project is in place, it's likely that we will share some of the same firewall technology as Buckinghamshire County Council, or Buckinghamshire Council, forgive me.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No. Disclosure of interests, item 5. Is there any? Bill?
Can I just repeat what I said at Milton Keynes, is that I am in possession of the fire brigade pension, but it's from London Fire Brigade, so that should be no different.
Yeah. Okay, that's noted. Item 6, matters arising from the previous meeting. Actions, Graham?
I think we've just covered that, Chairman.
We've done that.
Unless members had any other questions about any minutes actions.
Any questions from the community, our residents or whatever?
None.
Okay.
Just to review, Chairman,
Bobby?
it is important that we do get residents. How do we promote the opportunity and how do we advertise the fact that residents can come and ask? Because I can't imagine most of our agenda would cite residents, but the full authority agenda might. How do we publicise that? Because if we're not publicising it very well, how would residents know to come?
Well, this meeting is actually put on the website.
No, you misunderstand me. Most residents don't sit watching the councillors, unfortunately, for most of their life. They actually live a life. What I'm saying is they may have an issue. We should promote the open and democratic process that you would, as chairman, naturally wish to see. I think we should do some little bit of promotion around that because we don't know the issues until we hear them.
Absolutely, Graham.
Well, in terms of members of the public wishing to make representation up to the authority or committees of the authority, we do widely publish the agenda for all those meetings through the website and a very wide distribution list. And in the agenda pack, it does alert members to their entitlement to make representations to those committees. So it is promulgated through the internet and through the website.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Before we go on to the next item, can I just say item 10, we're going to put that beyond item 16 because the person can't get here till later in the meeting. So can you put that 10 beyond 16? Is that okay? Right, Graham, item 8.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a standing item and it may be listed in the agenda as RIPA policy. RIPA is short for the regulatory reform. Sorry, it's very short for the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. The Fire Authority is an enforcing authority. It has enforcement prosecution powers under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, and it therefore has powers, should it need to undertake covert surveillance of individuals in discharging those enforcement activities. The statutory guidance recommends that elected members be regularly appraised of any instances of covert surveillance, and I can confirm that in the last reporting period, we haven't used any of those powers.
Okay, any comments on that? Hello.
Thank you. Just as a new member, do you ever report any surveillance or, I mean, is it a regular occurrence or not?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Chairman. It's a power that we've been given, but it's not a power that we need to resort to use as part of our enforcement activities. And in fact, I can say that nationally, the National Fire Chiefs Council have made representations to the Home Office to say, take us out of scope, because by being in scope, comes with a lot of architecture of compliance, which we actually feel is unnecessary and burdensome because it's not, we can quite adequately use our enforcement powers under that fire safety legislation without needing to undertake any covert surveillance.
Oh, that's useful to know. Thank you.
Robin.
Yeah, just furthermore to that, Chairman, it makes logic that the enforcement power should be with the police to actually enforce and survey. If we were to have those powers lifted from us, what assurance would we have that if we wanted observations together, heavens forbid that we need to, that the police would have the wherewithal and the ability to be able to do it, realising that there's probably 20,000 less of them now, and hopefully growing back to where they were before. So is it appropriate that we enter into negotiation with them about it all of the third parties to make sure that there is no gap, because they're very different issues, day-to-day policing and things that I could imagine the fire authority might want to observe, which would be stuff on the lower end, I would imagine. Can I seek some assurance that we will have conversations to make sure there's no gap?
Right,
I don't feel best placed to respond to that question. It's something that I don't know if the Chief Fire Officer would be in a position to respond on that point, or it's something that we could come back to you outside of this meeting in terms of looking to collaborate on those points.
Thank you. I respect the answer completely. It's just that I always think in the rush to change things.
Okay, well, what we do is the answer is we'll come back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Any other questions on that? No? Okay, right. We'll put a recommendation for that, or that's completed.
That's noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 9. Have we got that? Internal audit report. We've got a very good officer online now.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Firstly, just wanted to send my apologies from Maggie Gibb, who had been presenting these papers. Unfortunately, she's not available today, but hopefully you'll be satisfied with my presentation. Firstly, we would like to thank the officers for their support during this year. Most of the audits were undertaken remotely and require them to be providing information through emails and a lot more meetings than normal, and all audit inquiries were responded to quite promptly, which enabled us to complete the work in really good time. So we just want to say a thank you to the team for that. So this report to you today outlines the internal audit work undertaken by the Internal Audit Service for the year ending 2021 and provides the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion on the adequacy of the control environment. In accordance with the account and audit regulations, the Fire Authority must maintain an adequate and effective internal audit service in accordance with proper internal audit practices. The CIPFA Public Sector Internal Audit sets out proper practice for internal audit and requires the Chief Internal Auditors to provide an annual report to those charged with governance, which should include an opinion on the overall adequacy of the internal control environment. It should be noted that internal audit is not responsible for the control system. It is management responsibility to develop and maintain the internal control framework and to ensure compliance. It is also the responsibility of internal audit to form an opinion on the adequacy of the system of internal control based on the work undertaken. For the year 2021, the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion is of reasonable assurance. This is based on the work undertaken and that we found no material weaknesses in the overall control framework, and the Fire Authority has continued to demonstrate a robust and effective internal control and risk management environment. It should be further noted that the Chief Internal Audit opinion does not imply that we have reviewed all risks relating to the Fire Authority. The most that the service can provide to the accountable officers and to the committee is a reasonable level of assurance that there are no major weaknesses in the control process. The opinion that we've given today is based on the work undertaken this year, which we've summarised for yourselves in Appendix 1 and 2, and these are in the pack on page 30 and on. We can confirm that there were no limitations placed on the scope of internal audit work and no suspected fraud or financial irregularities brought to our attention. With regards to our performance, all targets that were set as part of the SLA were met with the exception of one KPI, and this was relating to the issuing of one draft report, which should be presented to officers within 15 days of the exit meeting. Unfortunately, the auditor undertaking that work had COVID, and this caused delays, and these were communicated to officers. I was going to pause there and take any questions on any detail, if you're happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? I'm looking at you, Robin. Robin?
Yeah, well, firstly, can I thank you for a very thorough report. Two things really. This report was done more remotely, and I'm not suggesting by any stretch of imagination that by doing it remotely it wouldn't be thorough. Are there areas that you feel you're unable to address because of COVID? And if so, will you revisit those in a future report? And secondly, as we are all aware with the change in environment that it is, if we've only got to look what's taken place in our cousins in Germany and Belgium, will we introduce a line of audit against our environmental management, what we can do and how we do anything? Because I think going forward, we can only imagine that the environment's going to be a big draw on resources, and we have no means to manage that. Should we not introduce a line that we have it there, so that at some point in the future, when it's physically possible, we can actually do something in the way of auditing where we are with that? I'm not suggesting we haven't done everything we should have done, but it's a moving environment, to use a term, and it's moving very fast, as we can see in Belgium and Germany and what took place. And we have 2 large water catchment areas in the areas of authorities' responsibility, and looking at the volumes of waters there, it does worry one, and you can never have enough in place, Chair.
Okay, would you like to answer that?
Yes, no, absolutely. So in response to your first question regarding impact of COVID on remote auditing, we show no impact at all. With the use of technology, Teams, for example, we can share screens so we can see anything. As part of our audit process, we walk through to make sure we fully understand the process and identify sort of the key controls within that and review accordingly. So we don't feel that there were any areas that we weren't able to look at. All the audits that were in the plan that were agreed the previous year and presented to this committee were delivered. So on that side, COVID did not limit the work undertaken. With regard to your second question relating to environmental risks, I guess, as part of the internal audit planning process, we also liaise with the Director of Finance and Assets, and in that it looks at key risks that are being faced by authority. So if we are concerned about the environment in terms of what you've raised there, Councillor Statutory, then that will be factored in. Because as we said, internal audit cannot review everything. So our approach is to focus on the key risk areas that provide the assurance that's needed to the authority. The expectation is anything that's not reaching those high risk areas will be looked at by those management controls, and the assurances will be from that end. However, if there is a request from this committee, then it's something that we can factor in for future.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's been factored in. Emily.
Sorry, I was just going to expand on Councillor Statutory's point, because actually, even last night, we had a huge hailstorm up in Wolverton, knocked out 150 power in 150 homes. Reports we're doing of our most recent floods all speak to the fact that these are going to happen more frequently, and one of the key risks to property and people is some of the communication between authorities and the fire and rescue service. So I do think there is a key, there is something that we should look at next year, in next year's audit process, which not just looks at the kind of short-term risks to not communicating, not being able to share data, those sorts of things that have been all thrown up through our flood reviews at Milton Keynes Council, but also the longer term risk of what does that pressure of being called out to those kinds of environmental activities put on the authority in terms of its resources, and that becoming more and more frequent. I appreciate it's a longer term risk, but it is an important one to consider and factor in.
Okay, Mark, I believe you want to come in.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. No, it is a very real concern. Obviously, climate change, sustainability. It's obviously something that the Fire Authority has a vested interest in, because as Councillor Darlington says, we're at kind of the thick end of the response to floods, wildfires, those kind of things, which do appear to be becoming more frequent. We're doing a lot of good work in terms of sustainability. So we've got, for example, the new Blue Light Hub was done as BREEAM Excellent. We've got photovoltaic solar panels on a lot of our stations. We've just ordered our first electric vehicles in our fleet, which is a really good step. But at the moment, we don't have a environmental strategy as such. So there isn't something there that internal audit will be able to audit. That's one of my key actions for this year, is to draw together an environmental strategy, which pulls together all the good work we are doing, all the work we want to do in the future, how we can do stuff as a kind of service, but also how we can influence our community to improve sustainability. So that'll be something we develop this year, and I perhaps think will be on a future audit plan for something to look at as to how well we are meeting the strategy that we're going to set for ourselves. Hopefully that helps provide some context and background.
Excellent. Robbie?
Jason.
Hold on, the chief wants to come in for a moment. Jason?
Oh, thank you, Councillor Carroll. I've just come in on the tail end of that, so apologies for that, because I've been on the phone doing other things. Just picking up as well the issue about the pressure on the service. There is a pressure on the service in terms of the environmental aspects, certainly in flooding. Floodings have increased. Members may or may not remember, a number of years ago, we increased the presence in Newport Pagnell, where the authority invested quite heavily in state-of-the-art boats and rescue equipment. Newport Pagnell continues to be a station where water rescue is a focus, and following the investment that the authority made, what we also did was that we put Newport Pagnell on the national assets register for flooding across the country as well. So that places Newport Pagnell in terms of the north of Milton Keynes in a really, really good place and a key place in terms of the station. All the staff there are trained. So that there are a number of issues in terms of that the authority has invested in in the past 5, 6, 7 years. And obviously, when it comes to asset refresh, we'll have another look at that, and I'm sure members will support that. But just to put members' minds at rest, we have looked at the flooding risk, and we have invested there in Milton Keynes.
That's a good point. Robbie, do you want to come back?
I'm very grateful to the information given and the support that the firefighter is doing. But what I think we have to do is formally propose that we see this as a matter of urgency. When we say a matter of urgency, is that we do not know the time frame that we're going to be working towards, and anything that we have to plan will take a lot of planning, and the environment seems to be switching quickly. So I'd like to propose that we formally agree that we would like an update at a future meeting, and not in this calendar year, of what we would ascertain to put forward for an environmental plan, and we monitor that on a regular basis. And separately, it may throw up interesting things, because once you throw a net out, you collect things that you didn't know were there, and people will come through. I think we should. I'm conscious of the fact that we discussed this at main authority meeting, and I was ready to put a proposal and wasn't able. So I'm putting the proposal here that we do what I've just said, is so that we actually draw a line, and it is a line separate to all the other responsibilities we've done. So when questioned, it shows that we're adequately looking at these things, and no one can do enough.
Well, what we've had, Robin, and we've had reassurance by 2 senior officers, this will be put in place in the future. We've got no problem with it coming back to this meeting at some time. So I think we've already had reassurances can happen. Are we happy with that?
I just had a quick question of clarity for Mark in his environment strategy, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
When does he propose, and which part of the board or subgroup of the board is that going to come to? When do you think you'll be able to share that with the board?
The plan is to get that done this financial year, and it will probably go via, I would have thought, the Executive and Fire Authority, but I'm happy to bring an update to the next meeting of this board to appraise them of progress, to seek their views, to help, because it'd be useful if they could help shape that strategy as well, I think.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, I think we've got to bear in mind that the 3 emergency services design their business around dealing with emergencies. And emergencies have been happening for many, many years. and you work to that schedule, in as much as that if there is a concentration of emergency in one area, the brigades across the country work on a spider base where you put the pen in the web and pull it, and you'll see everything move. So there is a general cover right across the country. That's always been the case. Well, in my lifetime, it's always been the case, and Bucks have helped out London, and London have helped out Bucks. But Fire Brigade are working around emergencies and have general training to deal with emergencies at all times. So, it's nothing new. Maybe they'll become more regular, but that's a whole training is based around dealing with something when you're in need of help. And I just think that might come, but I don't think we're, one lot of flooding or one lot of thunder is not going to change the world overnight.
Interesting, that, Bill.
Just,
Robbie, you don't want to come back?
yeah, I do. I also want to come back until it's impossible to come back. I'd like to propose then that we as a committee enthusiastically support the notion of bringing back a future report that doesn't on the environmental impacts, so that we actually show that we are supportive of this, so that we can say that is something that then the authority will have to know that we've actually said that. What I'm not going to do is write the report in a motion or a proposal. That's really irresponsible. I think that little bit that we as a committee, audit committee, agree that a future report should come back. I don't think that's too hard. It means that we've actually said we want to, and we agree it's important enough to do so.
Well, what we've had, Robin, is you've heard it from the two senior officers in the organisation, the reassurance that the report will be coming back through the structure. So I think we agree with that, don't we? Thank you, Robbie.
That we all agree. You think we agree with it? If you think we agree with
No,
it.
I thought Mark was really clear. He was going to come back. He wanted our contribution.
Absolutely.
to the
So,
policy
yes.
strategy. So-
Absolutely, yes.
So we'll
We
see
are,
that at the
we
next
are
one.
in agreement.
And then we've got
We're
Mick
in
coming back to
agreement,
agree as
Robin.
well.
Let's take it where we can get it, Robin.
Mick, are you going to agree with us as well?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carroll, and good morning, councillors. It was just really just to clarify the points that I think that there's two aspects to the environmental piece. There's the environmental strategy that Mark has mentioned that he's going to be bringing back, and then there's the response to kind of environmental emergencies. And that's fully captured in our public safety plan about our response efforts and just supporting the other piece that the councillor put forward very eloquently around how fire and rescue services support each other, and that's actually enshrined in law as well. So when there is a major emergency, it's enshrined in the Fire Services Act that there is mutual aid available across the country, and then there is also what's called the sort of the new dimensions, national assets and national resilience that we can call upon as well. So it was just to reassure members that from a response to environmental incidents and those types of climate change incidents, we're very, very well prepared, and it's included in our public safety plan. But then it's that further piece around the actual environmental strategy for the organisation, how we move forward and how they complement each other. So it was just to make that point and just to assure members that we're very well prepared from an operational perspective.
Thanks very much, Mick. Right, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, that kind of misses my point. My point wasn't how we work across fire authorities. It's how we work across emergency response. So the council has a role in the emergency response, the police, the fire authority, and how that works in these public incidents. And clearly the reports that every Section 19 and flood report that we're doing in Milton Keynes shows that has a way to go to improve. So
Okay.
I absolutely appreciate what you're saying about that it is going really well with other fire authorities, and let's try and make that work across all the responsibilities.
Obviously by the views of the senior officers and the committee, we've been reassured that this will be coming back. So a good point there, and you're obviously passionate about this, and we all are. Bill, who's had experience in the fire service, he said the right words at the right time. So thanks so much for that. Right, sir. Fran, can you put the recommendation?
Thank you. The recommendation is on Page 21. It is recommended that members review and note the contents of the annual audit report.
Great.
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 Do you remember number 10 has been pushed down to under 16? Is that okay? Item 11. Right, Treasury Management Performance. Can we move on? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Marcus Hussey. I'm the Principal Accountant and I obviously work in the finance team. So good morning, members and officers. Today I'll be presenting the Treasury Management Performance Report for financial year 2021, which starts at page 89 of your packs. For financial year 2021, the accrued interest earned was 113k, which is 37k lower than the budget set for the same period. As you can see, the authority was unable to meet the budget requirements set for 2021, which was 150k, and this was predominantly due to the impact of COVID-19. However, the authority was still able to achieve 75% of the budget set for the year. This was mainly due to several deals that were made pre-COVID, resulting in better rates of interest. At the Fire Authority meeting held in February 21, as part of the MTFP, which is a medium-term financial plan, the investment income budget was reduced from 150k to 30k to reflect the anticipated continuation of low interest rates into 21-22. Early indications are that a 30k budget set for 21-22 will still be a challenge to achieve following the unanimous vote 8-1 at the Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC, in June 21 to keep the interest base rates at a record low figure of 0.1%. I, along with the Director and Deputy Director of Finance and Assets, have a meeting with our Treasury advisors in August to discuss our Treasury strategy and economic outlook for the future. Finally, we continue to monitor our cash flow on a daily basis so we can meet our short-term expenditure requirements and maintain adequate liquidity. To support this, the investments we currently have in place are with a number of counterparties and maturing on a frequent basis. Thank you and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Alan, then Robin.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. The investment counterparties appear quite safe and that sounds reasonable. I just wonder how our investment portfolio compares to other authorities. Is there, I mean, they look mostly like banks, most of them. Do other authorities invest in other places? So that's one question. And on page 93, it talks about accrued interest of being 37,000 lower than planned. And I just wonder if that was particular to this year because we've had a lot of turbulent times this year, or whether there's some fundamental change that we'd see this being sustained for a longer period, and whether that will be accounted for in the next year's plan as a lower ambition in terms of interest accrued.
Okay, can you answer those two questions, please?
Yep. Thank the Councillor for your questions. For the first one about the authority investments and compared to other authorities, we do receive a monthly report of our investments, but we also receive a quarterly report on benchmarking against other local authorities, and we do ourselves try to have a mixed blend of working with both banks and building societies, and I think that is a common theme across the board as well, to try and don't put all our eggs in one basket, we should say, because obviously there's a high risk in that area. When within our strategy, we do say we don't invest more than 30% of our portfolio with one specific bank or building society. So on that side of it, we do take the approach of making sure we do have our money split across different authorities and different banks and building societies, I should say. And to your second question, financial year 2021 was the first time we've not met our budget requirement. In terms of interest, we've always overachieved. So the main factor is COVID and the low interest rates. If the interest rates do pick up, then again, we are willing and we will be increasing our budget requirements going forward at the future MTFP planning. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Great. Robin, then Bill.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Maybe appropriate to ask a question now, but there are elements within the corporate risk register which affect the finances where are we going? Are we going to discuss that now, or are we going to leave that for a bit later in the meeting?
Bit later.
A bit later, in which case, I note what you're doing. We are in a static economic market for investments. It's not really going up and going down, and I respect the fact that local authorities have to be risk averse, so we can't go for some of the higher risk investments because that's not what we can do. So I respect the report. I will come back with some questions on the corporate risk register, which in their actions do implement on our finances going forward. But I won't raise them now, we'll wait for the chairman.
Okay, so you've got no, so Bill?
Yeah, on page 91, we've got the counterparties in the table there. It's all very clearly explained and can I congratulate on that. It's not often you can get finance to look attractive to read. It is obvious that most of the in that box are building societies or money markets. I've got to show my ignorance. Who is Close Brothers? Because it sounds like a smaller firm that, you know, I don't know.
Massive players.
They are massive, are they?
Yeah, they're an investment company. So they're a bank and they've got investments and they deal with other local authorities as well.
Right, I've never come across them.
Yeah, and the money market funds are just they're funds that we've got instant access to, so we don't have to wait for them to mature. We can say we needed money today, we can get the money out straight away. So we got the liquidity there for short-term requirements.
Okay, well, that's fine. Show my ignorance.
No, that's a good question. Okay. Moving down to other questions. Brad, put the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members. The recommendation is on page 89 that the Treasury Management Performance 2020-21 report be noted.
Agreed.
Everybody agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you for that. Annual government statement. Graham?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, members. This is my report. The accounts and audit regulations require that the annual governance statement be approved in advance of the adoption of the statement of accounts. The draft annual governance statement before you is for the financial year 2020-21. Once approved, it will be submitted to the Chief FAR Officer and the Chairman of the Authority for signature. The document has been created with inputs from across the directorates and the internal governance boards and with feedback from the Chairman of the Authority. The format of the document has been set out to reflect the 7 principles of good governance as contained in the guidance issued in 2016 jointly by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy and the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives. In addition, SITFA issued a bulletin in February 2021 recommending that an annual governance statement for 2020-21 should reflect the following: adaptations to reflect new ways of working and emergency arrangements, changes to business as usual activities, including cessation or reduced frequency or scale of activities, and finally, longer term changes to priorities, programs, strategies and plans as a result of the impact of the pandemic on the organisation and the local area. As a result, you will see in the statement at page 102 in the agenda pack that it sets out how the authority and its officers adapted to the practicalities and challenges of decision making at member and at officer level. In addition, at pages 103 and 104 of the agenda pack, the statement sets out how certain aspects of work were deferred and how the service did things differently, and also how the service extended beyond its statutory duties to give greater support to the ambulance service and created new partnerships with health and social care providers. These areas are given an overview at pages 108 and 109 in the agenda pack, which includes a link to a letter from Her Majesty's Inspector Matt Park praising the work of the service's employees for undertaking additional roles to protect our communities. Members will see that at the end of the statement, which is at page 123 of the agenda pack, it reproduces the Chief Internal Auditor's opinion, and as you will have heard from Selina Harlock earlier, and it includes the acknowledgement of the Chief Internal Auditor's auditor of the services response to the COVID-19 both internally and externally, and providing additional support to the public. If I now take members to Appendix A, which is at 125, starts at 125 the agenda pack, this presents an update on progress against the governance issues intended to be addressed in 2021. One area was completed in the year, which was a review of its internal governance board arrangements to complement the establishment of a project management office function. And 3 other areas have been reprioritised and given new completion dates as set out in the respective columns. Looking forward to this financial year, Appendix B, which starts at page 131 in the agenda pack, proposes 4 additional areas to be addressed in 21-22, and they are set out as follows. Firstly, to continue the work of the review of the internal governance arrangements, looking at the lower tier officer boards within the organisation. Secondly, to look at performance reporting and looking at integrating how performance and financial information is reported to improve compliance with the SITFA Financial Management Code. Thirdly, in terms of corporate risk management, to enhance member scrutiny of corporate risks by engaging with lead members for their input in evaluating the risks. And finally, down at number 4, to review how the statutory data protection officer function is covered within the authority. The recommendations, Chairman and members, of page 77, I'm sorry, beg your pardon, 97, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, Ralph, Alan, Emily.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, in my time as a councillor, I've read through many annual governance statements and asked questions on them. This one I think stands out as being very well laid out, very clear, and very well written. I think it's a really good piece of work. It's transparent, and I think it's kind of modest in what it sets out to do, and it's a good piece of writing to address the authority's responsibilities. I particularly like the action plans in Appendix A and Appendix B, which give clarity on areas for improvement and milestones about how those improvements will be implemented. So it's a good piece of work. Thank you.
Alan.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. A few points. One's a general one and one's a specific one to the papers. The general one is, so we've had a challenging year. We've had to do things, novel things that we've never done before, invent new processes. So it's sort of shaken up the system quite a bit. So we made internal reporting slightly different from maybe previous years. So I just wonder if there's anything being thrown up that was changed for temporary reasons that may actually sustain through and become permanent. So that was a sort of general question. And the second specific one relates to page 132 on the priority actions and particular action 4, which is the review of the statutory data protection officer function and looking at potentially outsourcing that or sharing its services with other authorities. Looking through all the papers today, there's a theme for me as a challenge for the authority is data protection, and there's a number of risk items and a number of areas being flagged up that have been slight concern to me. So I think this is an important area to actually look at carefully. So I'm just wondering what the benefits you think are of sharing that with another authority rather than taking action in this authority, but outsourcing it or sharing it. What are the benefits of that?
Yeah, I'd perhaps take those in reverse order. So looking at the review of statutory data protection function, we've taken a view corporately that if a post becomes vacant, we don't automatically look to refill it because obviously we are under intense financial pressures. So if there's a possibility of reviewing how that is delivered more effectively, more economically, that's something that we need to explore. As set out there, it's about exploring options. I'm in preliminary dialogue with a couple of other local authorities about those options. But I would say it's the financial envelope in which we're working that is the driver to review any post. And this happens to be a statutory post, but across the organisation, particularly in support services, we are looking if we can deliver things differently, particularly in a partnership arena. In terms of doing things that we've had to adapt and do things differently, if I just perhaps concentrate on the internal, in terms of the internal reporting thing, I suppose one of the massive changes for us is having to upskill very, very quickly in terms of these meetings. As you've probably seen, we're still learning every day in terms of the technology, and that's quite difficult to resource. But I think probably that's one of the big changes is looking to, in terms of internal boards and the committee meetings, perhaps leveraging that technology to enable more remote working, remote reporting into those bodies, which obviously one of the ancillary benefits of that is to reduce the carbon footprint of travel and what have you. So I would think from my remit, I would think the biggest change that we're looking to explore and continue further is the way that these meetings are convened, these meetings and also officer meetings.
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you. Just picking up on Graham's last point, which I think is absolutely essential that we start, as you said, for environmental reasons, but also for cost-saving reasons and for accessibility reasons, because I assume that's why we're missing a councillor today, because he's been pinged. I assume that's why he's joining us.
He's celebrating Eid, actually.
Oh, he's celebrating Eid. Okay. Well, we're having a problem. Yeah. So Eid Mubarak. I mean, so one of the things is absolutely, can we look at doing that? I appreciate that government has done their stupid regulations around council meetings, parish meetings, authority meetings. They don't apply in Westminster, but they apply here. So it's ridiculous. But I think there's a continued movement across all of those to kind of say, actually, we can use technology now in a way that is both cost saving, environmental, and all of those sorts of things, while still increasing the openness and transparency of what we're doing. And so I was going to, the core principle B, which is this: ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. One of the key things I was going to look at is this public engagement. I know that we've had to restrict access, obviously, to the stations and others because of COVID, and that's not going away anytime soon, I presume, because we'll be wanting to protect as much as possible, even just from being pinged, our teams, so that we don't have reduced staff, as we've seen across various other essential groups. But I was thinking about how then can we use this as an opportunity to use technology, to use other sorts of things to engage in different ways with the public, with particularly young people, because they're the ones that really enjoy coming to see the fire engines. Are there any thoughts and plans about saying, not just going back to the way we were, but actually thinking about how we do it differently in the future, knowing that we probably have another 2 years of this up and down with the pandemic, and we certainly wouldn't want to not engage with young people for a whole 3 years. That would be a real shame for them, wouldn't it?
I can give a partial response to them in terms of my awareness of our
engagement,
community engagement, and that's I'm aware that very successfully our protection team have delivered online seminars, excuse me, to business owners and employers about their responsibilities under the regulatory reform fire safety order. So that's a specific area that I know has been very successful, leveraging that technology. But in terms of the wider engagement, there are probably colleagues that specifically deal with community engagement and particularly in the prevention and protection arena. So I can see Jason's going to pick that up for me.
Thank you. Is it okay to speak, Chairman? Yeah. In terms of engagement with the most at risk in the community during COVID, one of the things that we have found really useful is the fact that we manage, and councillors will be aware, we manage, for example, 4 vaccination centres across Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, and we've been really successful in engaging with health authorities and local authorities and supporting them to vaccinate people across the community. But we also use them opportunities to engage with them with fire safety advice and fire prevention advice. So we have the most at risk in our community coming to be vaccinated, for example, in Milton Keynes or Wickham or Aylesbury. And at that point, our community safety officers will also engage with them from a fire safety perspective. That's one of the things that we found really, really useful about the partnership working piece. The service has continued through the COVID as well to always go to priority groups whenever we possibly can with the appropriate risk assessments. So we've targeted the most at risk in terms of prevention advice, etc., and that will continue moving forward. We've been involved lately, certainly in Milton Keynes as an example. Over the weekend, we were involved with the MK Centre with the local authority in engaging younger people to go and get vaccinated. So we're at the MK Centre on Saturday with with Milton Keynes Council colleagues to engage people to encourage them to be vaccinated. And so there's a lot of engagement going on in the background that a lot of people won't see. So I think hopefully that answers the question in terms of prevention. In terms of protection and the legislative requirements, Graham's right. We have picked up a number of we have conducted a number of online seminars in terms of fire protection, and also we will always respond to complaints or fire safety issues that have a high priority. And regardless of the COVID regulations in place, if, for example, we need to take legal action in terms of fire protection issues, we will and have done during the last 12 or 18 months.
Very useful and helpful. Thanks so much, Jason. Okay, Robin.
Well, firstly, thank you for what I would call a reasonable and thorough report. I do have problems with some of these things. I went to Buckingham Secondary School. I didn't go to acronym school. Buckingham Secondary School, they didn't teach us acronyms there. I think the overuse of acronyms I find in reports is, I know there's minimalist in this. I read some reports where it's great. I don't know the full explanation of CIFA. I just know that I took a COVID test this morning, and we don't know what this acronym means. I know it's a financial management code. I don't know what the words mean because I've never seen them as a counsellor in one paragraph. I've always seen, I think acronyms can be both disjointing and don't have any purpose if you can't understand what the acronym is. So I brief explanation of my naivety would be grateful, because I'm sure there's lots of other people who do it. And and many of us have been fortunate to be in public life, when you get to the health service, it's king of all acronyms, isn't it? To hide everything what's going on. I don't think that's what we're doing here. But please can we minimise that, and a brief explanation of what that means would be grateful. And I do support Councillor Darlington's view that we should try to get something out there to engage with young people, because at the moment we've got the summer holidays coming up. We seem to have gone from one set of regulations quite swiftly into a set of regulations in which I'm still trying to figure out what they actually mean for my day-to-day life. So we are in a fluid situation when it comes to regulations and what we can do with young people. But I do think one thing that always just cheer up people is the one thing: if you park a fire engine at any event, even if you don't allow people into it, it stimulates discussion and debate. And it's one of the best things the fire service has got is the fire engines actually do connect young people, and they resonate with that. And the fire officers actually, children do react to them far better than they do at some other uniform positions. And so I think we should try to see if we can get out to events if possible throughout the summer. just so youngsters know that they're there and they can see their firemen again, because they actually enjoy seeing them, to be honest. And they, any small boy or small girl climbs up into a fire engine, you can just see them beam when they get out.
Yes,
So if we can do some of that, if possible, that would be a good thing. But this acronym things always irritate me. As I said earlier, I didn't go to acronym in school. I went to Buckingham Secondary School, and they didn't teach us about acronyms there. I'm not sure what they taught at all, but we didn't get acronyms.
We didn't. Chief explained earlier on about which they're trying their best to get out to the public and engage and whatever. That I think point's taken. Round, could you?
In terms of the abbreviation, I did spell it out in full when I was talking to the paper, and I in the first reference I always try and set it out in full. So at page 97 it does expand on it. So I'm happy to repeat it. It's the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy.
I thank you kindly. You're the first person who's willing to instantly explain an acronym, so you get a star prize for that. Thank you.
There we are. So, Robbins, please, quickly. Right, any other questions? Otherwise, can we put the recommendation?
Certainly, Chairman, members. It's at 97, and it is in 3 parts. That the annual governance statement 2020-21 be approved. And 2, that the progress on the implementation of the
Here,
I think that might be Councillor Mahmood.
I think he probably doesn't realise.
Yes.
It's lovely to hear the children though.
He's on.
Nice to hear the children.
Does any member want me to repeat?
Do you want that repeated, or do you? No.
I did just about hear it through the.
Okay, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Robin?
It's carried.
I was listening to the children.
Right, item 13, corporate risk management. Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. So this is the regular report on the status of our corporate risks, which we present to every meeting of this committee. The papers at pages 133 to 151 of your packs comprise of a covering report and 3 appendices, and these reflect any changes and updates made since the committee last met in March. Since then, the risk register has been subject to regular review by officers at our performance monitoring and strategic management boards. Most recently at the 22nd of June Strategic Management Board, and also by lead members where individual risks fall within their areas of reference. As you can see, we have not added any new risks since our last report to you, nor changed the risk scores or RAG statuses. However, there have been quite a few developments across most of the risks, which are summarised at page 2 of the cover paper and detailed in Appendix 3 at pages 141 to 151 of your report packs. As you will appreciate, the nature of most of these risks is dynamic and therefore constantly evolving. With that in mind, I will now just update you further on developments in relation to a couple of the risks since we finalised this report. In doing so, I will refer you to Appendix 1 at page 137, which is the risk map that displays the RAG status and distribution of the 6 corporate risks based on probability and impact. I will start with the pandemic risk, as this has been receiving even more attention than usual in the media following the government's decision to relax many of the legally enforceable restrictions from Monday, albeit that many, of course, remain on an advisory basis to be left to the discretion of employers, public service providers, businesses, and the wider public. Regarding our own position in relation to this, our pandemic management group has reviewed the potential impact of the changes announced on Monday and decided to remain at stage 3 of our pandemic recovery strategy for the time being. This means that all staff should continue working to our pre-existing COVID-19 arrangements following the lifting of the legally enforceable national restrictions, and that's to help minimise the potential impact on our own staff and the communities that we serve. So measures such as social distancing, enhanced hygiene regimes, and the use of appropriate personal protective equipment will continue in all of our workplaces and when we are out and about in the community. These arrangements will remain in place until the 16th of August, after which they will be subject to further review. And I'm just going to, as is obviously a very live issue, I'm just going to ask Simon Tuffley, who is our lead officer on COVID, just to perhaps just update us a little further on what's been going on in the last sort of very few days. Simon.
Thank you, Stuart, and good morning, Chairman, and good morning, members. Yes, Stuart is quite right. We made that decision last week around staying at step 3 of our recovery strategy. So currently we are maintaining a degree of COVID controls to ensure that our staff are protected and the communities we serve are protected. We are keeping a close eye on the impact from self-isolation requirements. Like many other businesses and services, we're experiencing an increase in self-isolation requirements, and where these staff members cannot work effectively from home, it does have an impact, and we have seen a minor impact on our resourcing. So for those reasons, we are keeping those controls in place. The previous discussion around the prevention initiatives, it is worth bearing in mind we are at step 3, so we have unlocked a lot of the previous restrictions. So prevention activity has commenced again, albeit risk assessed and albeit with certain caps on numbers, but we are doing that important prevention work. So thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Simon. Regarding the 3 red rag status risks, the position remains as reported in the summary at page 2 of the cover paper. That's page 134 of your pack. And obviously the detail behind that is in Appendix 3, which is pages 141 to 151. Regarding the information security risk, currently at amber status, we continue to monitor developments closely, and members will be aware from recent news reportage of a number of high-profile ransomware attacks, particularly on US targets and infrastructure, such as the Colonial Fuel Pipeline that serves the US East Coast. We remain vigilant in relation to this risk and keep our own protective measures under continuous review to ensure that they are as effective as they can reasonably be. Finally, turning to the EU transition risk, which was reduced to green rag status in January following the conclusion of the trade and cooperation agreement between the UK and the EU, members will have noted the positive adequacy decision in relation to GDPR, which was one of the final transitional milestones. In light of this and the absence of any foreseeable disruption to our services from any residual level of risk, we would welcome a view from the committee as to whether you would like to keep this risk on the corporate risk register for now, or de-escalate it for monitoring in the relevant directorate risk register. Obviously, that would not preclude us from bringing it back in the future should circumstances require it. So that concludes my update. I would welcome any questions or comments that members may have before we hand back to the committee chairman to confirm the decision in relation to the recommendations at page 133. Thank you.
And can I just move on to Graham about the question just give us about the European risk scenario? If you want to repeat that again, or does that they hear that? Do we want to remain on the risk register or not?
I
I
propose.
have a question about it before we go on.
Oh, okay. Hold on, Robin first.
Yeah, well, I'll allow the question. I've got a proposal on that, but I also got 2 questions, Chairman, I'd like to ask on the risk register.
Okay.
I indicated in the previous.
Can I just check, Stuart? Stuart, can you hear us okay?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so sorry, Mike, I hear what you're saying about some of the initial risks around the UK EU deal that you were concerned about. And I think my worry is, and I just wanted to ask some questions, clearly there is a lot of equipment that you rely on, a lot of things like that. What is the, and I'm new to this, so what is the interplay with that, with the European market? And are you seeing delays and prices go up and things like that? Because I think this is something that we're hearing from businesses across Milton Keynes. You know, we know that soft lumber is up like 40%. We've got all of these sorts of consequences from the UK-EU deal, and I just don't, because I don't understand your supply chain in terms particularly of your equipment and other stuff, how much of that's linked into the European market.
Thanks for that question. in relation to that, obviously this particular risk was very much couched around the immediate risk of physical disruption to the service. As regards those longer term, perhaps more strategic risks that you're referring to, that would, I guess those would manifest themselves partly in the funding and savings risk, and there might also be other areas of risk that we might capture in directorate risk registers or elevate up. I might just ask Mark Hemming, our Finance and Assets Director, for a view on that particular area.
Yes, that's a good question. In terms of the risks to kind of supplies and the price increases, at the moment it's very hard to distinguish between the impact of Brexit potentially and the impact of COVID that's had on prices. So I think, for example, a lot of the issues around supply of, as you say, lumber, building supplies will be just as much due to COVID, where people are using, rather than going on holiday, using that money to renovate their homes. And we have seen price pressures in terms of doing some renovations on some of our buildings. The biggest risk we had in terms of Brexit and supply was around the cost of chassis, because there were talks around huge tariffs on the chassis for our fire appliances. That thankfully hasn't materialised at the moment. There are some issues that we're working through of when vehicles have to go into Europe to be repaired. So, for example, one of our aerial appliances has to go to Germany for its major service. There was some additional paperwork, some additional hold-ups there. But in terms of price supplies across the board, we haven't seen anything significant as a result of Brexit so far on that.
Okay. Councillor Hussain's got his hand up. Would he like to speak, or is he leaving the meeting or whatever?
Is that all right, Mr. Chairman? Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for supporting me as elected as Vice Chairman. My question, I think, the partly was answered anyway. It was risk assessment under the new restrictions of COVID-19, and I just wonder what we are planning to do.
Okay, can we just go back to Robin first, because he's got some questions on the same subject, and then we can add that. Can you come back with the answers, Stuart, if you can, please?
I've got two questions, Stuart. Page 3, page 11 of your reference. If we take page 11 and it quantifies the employees' pension scheme and the fact that the tribunal found in favour of the employees, which is an important factor. The risk of the £3 million has to be noted, and the comments that it can be mitigated over a period of time. Maybe it can, but we need to understand the long-term financial cost of that, which is, I presume, not being a member of the authority when the decision to take was not taken in prejudice but in error. So we need to quantify that. And then if you go back to page 3, and we discussed and put quite eloquently down the situation with the £5 council tax rise to not to be profitable, but to actually just manage to maintain services at the level we are. And you also quite eloquently suggest that we should lobby MPs. Now, I do watch MPs' voting records quite carefully, and they're not always in line with what we would like. So, to say the least, they seem to have somebody else steering their vote. But I do think we need to quantify those two things together, because one is going to have a financial impact on the shortfall of £800,000, and whether that can be mitigated over time, I suggest it probably can, but at least we've recognised that the fire authority workers' pay pension was underfunded and needs to be supported. So we have to quantify that. And going back to the comment I'm going to comment on earlier, which is basically my view is that it's far too early in a situation of 12 months of or more of COVID to consider that we're in any position to not keep monitoring the outcomes of the country's decision to leave the European Union. We have to respect that decision, but we still have to monitor the outcome of where we are with it, because I was only this week having the misfortune of having to buy another vehicle and talking to the garage, and they are having large problems with supplies and getting things like chips and parts to do them, and they've had huge issues. Now these issues may get sorted out by reasonable negotiation and re-engaging with our colleagues in Europe rather than standing one side and not engaging with them. I'm hopeful that that will, as we move further away from the decision of the country, that sense will prevail and a normal tick in relations will happen. But in the interim, it's so evident that we don't know the risk to even consider that you would take it off something when we've not even seen the outcome of it, because it's been masked by the necessity and the financial outlay to do with COVID the government has actually had to lay out. The authorities having to work through that, to even introduce it at this stage as something that we might consider to do it is rather mute politically and ill-advised, I would suggest, because we don't know the outcomes of it and we shouldn't be making a decision like that. But my problem questions is those two elements around the finances, which are very key.
Yeah.
They're very key. And in your report, you have premised them excellently, and I commend you for that, but we do need to discuss the variances.
Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Obviously, those are all good questions. Perhaps if just in relation to the last one around the EU transition risk, and obviously the longer term issues potentially in relation to that. When I say what I was proposing is not, we're not necessarily proposing, we just wanted to take a steer, I think, from members as to whether you wish to continue to scrutinise it at this level in your committee. If we were to de-escalate it, it would sit in a directorate risk register, and it would be subject to ongoing monitoring by officers, and were obviously anything material that might be of significant concern to arise, we would of course re-elevate it for member scrutiny. But we're very happy to take a view from members on that one. It's not a firm proposal as such. It was more just to take a sense of whether you wish to continue to monitor that particular area of risk at the present time. In relation to the other two areas around quantifying the risks, obviously effectively funding gaps that we have and exposures in relation to the pension scheme, I can see Marcus appeared, and I will hand over to him because he's much better equipped to deal with those than myself.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Councillor Statutory. Very astute point to link the pensions risk and the finance risk. There is a kind of a big interplay between the two. Just to update members on the latest developments, I'm working at a national level with local government association colleagues, National Fire Chiefs Council colleagues and the Home Office around our submission for the upcoming spending review, which we think will need to be submitted to Treasury by the end of August. And obviously within that, there's a big kind of discussion around precept flexibility, funding for both pensions administration and potentially increased employers' cost of pensions. So it's obviously something we're very keen. We're keeping a close eye on, working closely with government as far as possible. And the Home Office are aware of our financial situation because it's been picked up by HMRC FRS. And we are looking to do what we can to secure a sustainable funding settlement for us going forwards.
Okay, Robin.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That's a good result. I did the mute point of the previous thing on the. I think I made it totally clear, if not evidently clear, in what I said. That I think that it is a new political point to want to remove it at this stage. I think that we should keep monitoring these things in an apolitical manner, because to drop it off our risk register is predetermining a decision that we would know all the knowledge about what was going to take place. And if anyone did know all the knowledge of what they were going to take place, it was never evident to me in both parties' discussion in the original decision, which the country took to, which was a democratic decision.
It was. I think
I think we should keep it in, basically, to ensure, because otherwise we are negligent.
Jason.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up one of the points raised by Councillor Stutchbury in relation to the MPs, I can confirm that I met Sarah Green, the new MP for Chesham and Amersham, on Friday. I've also been in touch with Steve Baker, the MP for Wickham. I've also had a meeting with the Aylesbury MP, Rob Butler, and there are further meetings in the diary for all of the MPs of Buckinghamshire in terms of and Milton Keynes to push the case for precept flexibility. So just to put that thing in terms of the other point that Councillor Stutchbury raised, it's entirely a member decision in terms of the corporate risk register. I think the point that Stuart was trying to raise in terms of the EU risk is that just because it disappears off the risk register at this level, that doesn't mean that we won't continue to monitor it. And if there are some issues going forward and they do present, then that risk will come back onto the risk register. This is just one of a number of risks that we continually monitor, just to put members' minds at rest.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, I've listened carefully and I haven't heard any material concerns around the EU, the Brexit deal. As regards to the fire authority, the risks that have been identified have been quite low. So I would support taking it off the risk register, because for me there are much more important things that this committee should concentrate on, and one of them is cyber security, which when I looked through the internal audit report, and I mentioned it early on data, when I saw that we haven't done a disaster recovery test, the outcome of a cyber attack is you have to recover your systems, and we haven't done a test. So these are the areas where I'd like to concentrate on, the big areas that could actually have catastrophic impact on the fire authority, whereas servicing of a machine has to go through a bit of paperwork. I don't see that as a major risk. So, and I agree with Councillor Stutchbury, we should be not political. It should be based on the magnitude of the risks. And for me, the magnitude of the risks, the EU Brexit risk, it's in the papers. There may have been concerns, but we have identified the problem areas. They don't seem to be material. There are some big chunky issues in terms of doing stores inventory checks and stuff like that we need to consider that are not potentially being done properly. So these are the things that this committee should focus on. Thank you.
Ashley.
Leaving EU aside, I've got a couple of questions relating into staffing from that point of view, and obviously looking at the risk register at the moment. We are as a country going through a skill shortage at the moment, and obviously on here I can see a couple of points. You've got a recruitment oversight board, which is to basically meet and ensure a joint approach. Who does it meet with, and who is it enabling a joined up support with? And obviously you've got on here review of resourcing and retention strategies, but I don't see any further action or changes as a result of that. And obviously in the risk register, you only mentioned about employees coming in on the 25th of August. I mean, what are we holding at the moment in terms of vacancies? And are we perceiving future recruitment to be an issue, and obviously retention to be an issue moving forward?
Okay.
Yeah.
Guess what I do for a living, by the way.
Callum's coming in, I believe. Callum?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I'll take the first question in relation to the one around the Recruitment Oversight Board. I chaired the last board, and the representatives on that board are covering all areas and all departments within the organisation. It's not just looking at one particular area. That meets to look at where the vacancies are and what the impact is likely to be on those, looking ahead of ourselves, not looking at the here and now. And a project has been commenced to look at how we recruit in the future. And I'm going to be giving you an update later on around our apprenticeship schemes across the organisation and how we utilise that particular methodology for developing and recruiting our staff within the organisation. I'll happily take more questions on that after I've given an update, but I hope that answers the question around the Recruitment Oversight Board.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Emily, one more question.
I have 3 points. One, I think Mark made me really clear that he couldn't at this moment identify what the what the impact of COVID and what the impact of Brexit was. So from my perspective, that means we should keep it on. He was very clear, he didn't know which one was contributing. So that means that we don't actually have the full information to make the decision today whether to take it off the risk register. So I think it would be imprudent not to. My real concerns around keeping pandemic resurgence at yellow, not least, we had some reference, and I just wanted to check with officers how much our crews are being affected by this kind of pandemic, where we're having to isolate, and as the government's been very clear that we're not going to have more national lockdowns and it's going to be to individual workplaces, where I think we're going to see this affect more and more, and quite concerned that this new phase may actually, given how quickly the rates are going up. So when you say you're reviewing it on the 18th of August, presumably you're not just reviewing it to lower COVID efforts. The numbers by the 19th of August, if we look at what the scientists are saying, are going to be enormous. So actually, I would urge us to be looking at increasing our COVID measures, not decreasing them by the 18th, if the scientists are correct. And the final thing I was just going to say is and I don't need to hear it here, but I just need to be reassured that we have one. What is our plan B if the MPs don't actually come through in the spending review?
Okay, I certainly know that the chairman of this organisation has been lobbying everybody possible, and this organisation in general has, so that will continue. The other questions, can I go back to you, Stuart, please?
Yeah, it wasn't a criticism of those efforts.
The Chief want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, so let me pick up the operational aspects in terms of the review of COVID. I attend and officers attend calls every single week, and there will be an update on COVID that comes into my offices or other offices certainly on a daily basis. So we continue to monitor the issues. In terms of the isolation piece, that has presented some issues for staffing, and will continue to present some issues for staffing as we move forward. Only yesterday, I was lobbying the National Fire Chiefs Council to put pressure onto the Home Office to consider exemptions for firefighters in terms of testing, etc., and to see where we're up to with that, and actually could there be exemptions to allow us for staffing. Staffing across the Fire and Rescue Service nationally is tight, there's no doubt about that, and locally it is tight, and so that's something we will keep our eyes on continually. In terms of if we're not successful in terms of the MPs lobbying, and they continue to lobby, and regardless, I will say this, that the MPs have always been supportive of their local fire and rescue service. Whenever I've spoken to them, they've always been supportive. We will bring forward plans to produce a balanced budget. That's what we'll have to do. That's what we have to do by law. We will produce plans to bring forward a balanced budget that may present us, or may present members, with some difficult decisions going forward, but we won't shy away from them difficult decisions. We'll bring a range of decisions. We're not there yet, but things are tight within the Fire and Rescue Service. There's no doubt about it. But just to put councillors' mind at rest, we do monitor it on a daily basis.
Thanks for that, Robin.
Thank you for that honest and open expression of the difficulties. That, you know, that is honest and open. I think it's appropriate now to discuss what those difficult decisions would be. But none of them are ones that anyone around here I would suggest would support, because they would be difficult decisions. We need to understand the time frame round. I'm not a sort of Westminster fan, that probably counts the whole place, but we don't know what influence our MPs will have on the budgetary and the spending review. But we do have the option that we have agreed previously to have a public referendum on the issue, which we have budgeted for and agreed. I would suggest that we need to premise that difficult decision with the public before we were ever entertain taking other difficult decisions, because not to test the view and the will of the public on their support for something before we did something we would not want to do, I think would be wrong. I don't know through the chair whether he would agree with that view, because we have taken that opinion. It hasn't been reversed. It was agreed.
This is a decision for the whole authority, so
Yeah. But we can have a view on anything.
thank you very much for that opinion. Going back to the chief.
Just to bring that in, the only referendum that we can find that was run was by Bedfordshire Police Authority. That invested in approximately £650,000 of public money in terms of referendum. We have put money aside. In that referendum, the Bedfordshire Police and Crime Commissioner lost the referendum, so that's £600,000. You know, where they got the response. In terms of difficult decisions, that will be in the paper. That will be a decision for the authority whether it wants to go for a referendum, and there will be other decisions that the authority may have to make, which will be difficult for all. But what I can guarantee to members is that we'll be open and honest about our plans, and we'll bring to the full authority, we will bring the mitigation to the financial risk into the public domain, and we can have a full and frank discussion. We're not there yet. I do have to say, in terms of, we've done really, really well this year. We did zero-based budgeting, which made a huge difference. Graham mentioned earlier as well, in terms of recruitment, every single time somebody leaves the organisation voluntarily, we will review that position and post, and we will say, actually, can we do it in a different way? Can we do it collaboratively? Can we save funding on that position? And how does that then affect the front line? So there are plans being drawn up in the pipeline, but like I said, we're not there yet in terms of that risk.
Thanks so much, Chief, and we appreciate your efforts and the challenges with it, and the chairman of this organisation has put a lot of in, and ourselves, of course. So I think that piece is finished. I think there's one other question is to ask us here today: European risk drop off or off. Alan put a very good case to come off. Ralph?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we need to be clear about how we consider what this decision actually is. We're giving a steer to the corporate management team about whether this committee is happy to delegate monitoring of that risk to the officers and directorates. It's not about stopping monitoring it. It's about, does it need to come to this committee? Now, from what I've heard in the presentation, there's nothing to say about it. So to spend 30 minutes discussing something when there's nothing there to talk about is not a good use of democratic time. So I support Alan that there's no point bringing something back to the committee to talk about when there's nothing going on. We've heard about the cost of softwood and all sorts of things, but it's great. But what about the price of fish? Let's stick to the business that this committee is here for, which is about overview and audits.
Okay.
If there's nothing happening on EU risk, then it's going to be brought back to us anyway. We've had that assurance.
Yeah, agree.
So you agree with that? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, that's the finish of that one.
So
Sorry.
So we agree with it.
No, we have a proposal in a second.
We
Okay.
speak to that.
Okay.
I think under the constitution, I don't think we're in a meritocracy again.
Alan?
I'd speak to that point. I respect the view.
Yeah.
I understand the view. I just disagree with the view. The view was made quite eloquently by Councillor Donovan that we've been in a COVID pandemic and we don't know. And the officer actually cited those elements within it. And we must take advice which is given to us. To ignore that advice is at best not good, and at worst is a mistake. So I suggest that we don't make that decision. We're not going to make that decision, but until we're through the horrendous situation of the COVID pandemic, which may be masked and things we cannot understand, we're not in a position to make this. I'm not Solomon, and I don't want to make politics out of this at all. But I think removing it is at this stage is far too early. I think it may be something we have to do in the future because it's time management of work we do. Doing it now, I've not seen any evidence. I listened to the officers, I listened to Councillor Darlington's, I propose contrary to that we leave it on until the evidence is produced and the officers tells us there's no necessity to be put on there. At the moment, there's no evidence. So we make a decision with no evidence. Make a decision with no evidence is a bad way to make decisions. And I'm not Solomon, as I said, and I can't see that far, and I can't predict these things or make those decisions. So I think it's far too early. It may be something we have to do later. So I would disagree with that and support Councillor Darlington's proposal with that proposal if we leave it on, which was made before the other proposal. Just we didn't take a seconder on that because the chair sought to get a seconder on the other view. So I would have seconded that instantly if I'd realised that was going to be a vote. So we have to, in my view, vote on the proposal to.
Well, we've got two proposals. The first one, and then Alan's the second one. So should we take a vote on yours first, Alan?
So I mean, it's going to be a bit binary decision. So we've got to propose, as I understand, we've got a proposal, a second for this risk to be removed from the corporate risk register to be reviewed by this committee. That's a proposal for this risk to be removed. I would suggest, Chairman, that perhaps that goes to the vote because I think the binary option of that is that it stays on, which would be the proposal from Councillor Statutory.
Okay, to remove the off the risk register, a vote. We vote for that.
Yes. So we have a show of hands.
Show of hands, please.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 in favour. Against? And there's no abstentions. That's carried.
Okay, Stuart.
Thank you. Obviously, we will enact the decision of the committee in relation to that particular risk. I've nothing further to add other than obviously just to refer to the recommendations in the cover paper.
Thank you.
So, Chairman, the recommendations from the officer were that the status report on identified corporate risks at Annex C be reviewed and approved, and that's been done, Chairman. And then comments be provided to officers for consideration and in attention for future updates and reports. So there was the proposal from the floor to remove, which was seconded, and there's been a vote to remove the risk that we've discussed. I suppose one final opportunity, if there's anything else that you would like to see considered at a future committee, if you don't need to provide that input now, you can provide, or you can if you wish, but you can provide it through online.
So I think we need to put an environment risk on here.
I'll second that. As we both premise that in meetings now, to no avail, and I think that we need to put it on here, and I'll second that. I think it's the right way forward. How that risk would come out, we're not that knowledgeable at the moment, but we do need to have it there.
Yeah. That's a proposal that's been seconded. I think it should go to the vote, Chair.
I think most people are happy with that one. Alan, do you want to?
I'm just reflecting on the comments that Councillor Chappell made earlier, where the authority is always reacting to the environment and targeting areas where we're most vulnerable. So I'm just wondering what's changed that would require that elevated risk assessment, because climate change is happening, but it's a long, slow process. Now, we have weather impacts, which are increasing in frequency, but the authority is adapting to these weather impacts, and Councillor Dynamic made the valid point that the authority should work closely with the local authority on mitigating that. So I'm just weighing it up in my head whether it's a material risk.
You've got two hands.
Yeah,
Which one?
So, first of all, I mean, just to say it is absolutely on our authority's risk register. Milton Keynes Authority. I don't know about Buckingham's Authority, but it definitely is on our authority's risk register, and I think that's important that it's discussed here. The other thing I would say is sometimes the frequency, like you're arguing about data breaches, that's something that's not new, but it is happening more frequently, and that's why it needs to be reviewed. Climate change. These things are happening more frequently. That's why it should be on the risk register.
I'll just speak to that. We don't want to get into a climate denier around this, because that's an evident route we don't want to take. No. The evidence is happening before your eyes. I've worked in agriculture for large parts of my life. I understand what's going on in the soil and how it's changed and the environment's changed. I can assure you the evidence of change of crops and the way they grow and the seasons have been changing for a long time. So as evidently said, cyberspace thing is not a new risk. There is, if we ignore really large signals of environmental disasters in not only our own local authority and not only in both Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, and we don't signal it as a risk, that says to us that we are not taking it seriously. We have to have it on the risk register. Not to do that would probably, even Buckinghamshire Council, at the steership of my good friend, has taken Bill Chappell, taken through environmental aspirations to, we may disagree on some of the business bit, the intentions are honourable to go forward to the claim. Both councils recognise it. It's about time we have it on the list. What it will grow into, we do not know. But having it on the risk register is important, and I would see it as a denial of the realities if we don't, and may come back to audit in many different places, especially as it's, I understand, on Milton Keynes Authority, the risk register, you would be contradicting your own authority's risk register. And in my case, I'd be contradicting the work of Councillor Chappell to recognise the environment. So I think that the proposal's supported from both authorities, and I would be interested in the explanation you give to the younger generation who evidently going to live with this longer than we are, if we deny the relevance of it. So I'm supporting that it goes on the risk register. I've seen no evidence for anybody to tell me that it isn't changing. And as I said, I've worked in the environment for my life. I've seen it change. I know what's going on. You can take soil samples and the microchondria, the soil's changing, and everything's changing, and to deny it, and the beans are dropping off and everything's going. Just to sit here and say it'll be okay, we will be gone by the time as people. We won't be here. We won't be here to witness it. But we should at least be honest about witnessing it for the next generation of children to make sure we put something on there.
Okay, Alan, then Bill.
Yeah, I think we should be careful here that we talk about risks to the fire authority and the fire authority's ability to react to external factors, and these external factors, although there is a frequency happening, it is a frequency that currently the fire brigade seem to be managing. I don't see the risk that the fire authority are not keeping up with the change. So the question for me is this material enough? It's a bit like the EU thing. Is it material enough to divert our attention to more than cybersecurity, which could have catastrophic impact on the local authority in terms of shutting it down completely? And if we don't have disaster recovery in place that's properly managed, that for me is a much bigger risk than actually flooding, which we've had a lot of increased flooding, but I haven't seen the evidence yet to say that the fire authority isn't coping with that or has contingencies and plans in place to deal with increased flooding. So it's a risk that's been managed already at an officer level. The question for me, is it an important risk that needs to be on the risk register for councillors to address? Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at this at very different angles. I have, over the last year, put a policy together for climate change. We recognise that it's happening. We recognise that it is coming unless we do something against. And as a council, that covers a 1.2 billion budget. That covers 70 farms and all the things associated with council, including schools and everything. It was important to have a climate change policy in place and a policy also to plant over 500,000 trees. That is as a land ownership council and a council that has got many buildings over many areas. The fire service is there to deal with emergencies. They do a lot of prevention work and always have done. But the end of the day is when somebody needs us, when somebody needs the fire brigade, we respond. When the time is right, I would expect officers to be bringing a suggestion on that. But at the moment, I think there is a tremendous amount of panic around, and the fire brigade do not work on panic. It is trained to deal with emergencies, and I think the time is premature. I quite agree with Alan that cyber attack could happen in 5 minutes' time, and we need, we've seen what's happened, and there's programs on TV about how many businesses that have been caught by that, but funny enough, none in Russia. We know it's there, and that maybe at one time, Robin said himself, we're not going to be around when it happens. So it's not something that we need to be putting in the risk register yet. I plan to have it for another 30 years at least. So I think it's premature. I don't think we need it.
Okay, so we're going to take, Graham, I believe we're stopping there now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Graham, what's the procedure?
I think.
Does Mark want to come in?
I think, and Stuart's just indicated a wish.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, I just wonder if there's a little bit of a confusion about where risks sit emerging here. Obviously, for this to be a corporate risk, it would need to be a pretty substantial threat to our ability to deliver our services to the public. In terms of where climate-related risks are captured, they're in our public safety plan, and they're incorporated as one of the key areas, 6 areas of risk that we manage out in the community. So obviously we'd need to satisfy ourselves that it really could put a hole in the side of our ship, as it were, for us to consider it to be something that we would elevate onto the corporate risk register at this present time. But as far as the managing the risk out in the community, yes, we play a part in that alongside other agencies, and particularly obviously through the Thames Valley Local Resilience Forum and the other sort of Category 1 and Category 2 responders. So we are very much in the business of playing our part in dealing with that risk to the extent that we can based on our statutory duties. So that was just a technical point to clarify.
Clarified it all, actually. So
perhaps we should just allow Mark.
Mark wants to come out with some financial.
Maybe.
No, not financial. Just to add some gloss to what Stuart said and what I said earlier. I endeavoured to bring an update around kind of environmental impacts, climate change to the committee at the next meeting. Perhaps can I suggest as part of that, I highlight some of the risks, the current treatment we've got for those risks, and that would allow members to have an informed discussion at the next meeting as to whether or not it warrants inclusion on the risk register at that point in time, having heard all the evidence and what we're doing at the moment.
Okay, so
sorry, Chairman, just
I think you've got a problem with the
just putting out a call for IT just to give us may need their assistance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
bring me on.
I think we need, there was a proposal in a second, I think that.
I mean, Mark was on about bringing the paper back to the next committee.
Well,
So,
we have a proposer in a second.
I think on the floor.
We have to discuss, we
Okay.
can't move past
Move on
that
then.
because you may have a different view or when it, whatever. We
Okay.
have have a vote because, and I propose it's a recorded vote as well.
Do you have a second for the recorded vote?
Yeah.
Can I just have an update with this? Councillor Bagg?
Against.
Councillor Carroll?
Against.
Councillor Chapel?
Against.
Councillor Darlington?
For.
Councillor Rankin?
Against.
Councillor Statutory?
Obviously for.
Councillor Waite?
Against.
The motion is defeated.
Presently.
Okay, thank you for that, members. Moving on to the next item, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, that's the
Equal Pay Audit. Mick.
Yes, thanks, Chairman, and good morning again, members. I'm just going to hand it over to Faye, who authored the paper, but just so members are aware, the lead member on this, Councillor Lambert, has had full sight of the paper and commends the paper to the committee. So over to Faye Mansfield. Thanks, Faye.
Good morning. Good morning. So the equal pay audit is the most effective way of checking.
Sorry, Faye Mansfield. Will you just?
Technical difficulty. Right.
Do you want to try it now, Faye? Try. Faye, can you try? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So an equal pay audit is the most effective way of checking the service is complying with its equal pay obligations, ensuring it delivers a pay system free from bias. This report confirms the outcome of the most recent equal pay audit, which confirmed the authority is achieving equitable pay between gender and the other protected characteristics of age and race. Under the Equality Act 2010, it is unlawful for employers to discriminate between men and women in terms of their pay and conditions, where they are in the same employment and are doing the same or similar work, work related as equivalent, or work of equal value. It is important to note that whilst the equal pay and gender pay both deal with the disparity of pay females receive within the workplace, a gender pay gap is different to equal pay. And organisations which are fully compliant with the Equality Act 2010 can still have a gender pay gap, which this service has and is taking steps to address. This is the first equal pay audit since 2013. In that audit, the integrity of the pay and grading structure was confirmed and a number of recommendations were actioned. There is one outstanding action that has been retained in the 2020 equal pay audit, and this is a review of the fleet management pay structure. To comply with the legislation, an equal pay audit is required to consider gender. At the outset of this project, it was decided to widen the scope. In addition to gender, analysis was also undertaken for additional protected characteristics of age, disability and ethnicity. Lots of changes taken place within the service since the last equal pay audit in 2013. The way the service is resourced now is very different. And what has come out of the 2020 equal pay audit endorses what and how the service does things now. The service is achieving equitable pay between age, gender and ethnicity, which is really positive. However, there is insufficient data on disability to be able to analyse this effectively. The results of extensive data analysis work within the equal pay audit will not be shared due to detailing personally identifiable information. However, the findings and recommendations that were made have formed the recommendations for actions as detailed within Appendix 1. Which includes 6 recommendations following the equal pay audit and 1 additional recommendation regarding flexible working. The size of the work within the recommendations varies. and will be undertaken during 21-22. Some recommendations are more straightforward, and other recommendations will be incorporated into long-term project work, some of which already has been established. Where actions directly impact on employees, the team will work closely with those affected, and an appropriate consultation will be undertaken. Whilst it needs to be acknowledged that continuing with the exempt pay point may have a low risk of legal challenge, this risk is already identified to the service and was detailed within the 2013 Equal Pay Audit. The numbers of individuals on this pay point continues to decrease through natural processes, and the recommendation is to continue with the exempt pay point as a protected pay point. With regards to how progress against each recommendation will be monitored, it is proposed to use internal governance arrangements, and going forwards, it is recommended that an equal pay audit is undertaken within the lifetime of each public safety plan. Thank you.
Which one, Rob?
Ladies first.
So I just wanted to say I was really encouraged the fact that we have done this equal pay audit and that we have identified areas that we are taking action on, and I think that's brilliant. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. So as you said, there are still problems since the last one in 2013. It's been 10 years. So I would propose that we ask the authority to do one in 2 years' time so that we don't wait another 10 years and have another recommendation that's lapsed for 10 years' time, because I think, as the paper shows, there's a real commitment by the authority to take action in this area. And I think we should be supporting that.
Robin and Alan.
Firstly, I've seen one or two of these from the lead officer before, and he demonstrates, and the lead counsellor, from that fact, they demonstrate a single understanding of the subject matter. The recognition of diversity, the recognition of equality is not in doubt from both the lead counsellor on this and the officers involved in this. All the signals are pointing in the right direction. What we need to do is get it over the line with the areas which are outstanding. So I think we approved the recommendations, Chairman, with the note that those areas outstanding need to be worked upon and brought back at an earlier point to be assured that they're actually taken forward. I think the timeline when we started this for 2030 is probably to do with legislation, not to do with actions that the authority would have taken to on, if I stand corrected on that, because any good employer should be doing this anyway. And as I stated, I've got every respect for the lead counsellor on this, though we may have always disagreed and discussed lots of different things. I know his sincerity to this issue and stands him in good stead. So I'm happy to do that with the proviso that we bring it back with the outstanding, as I repeated earlier.
Faye or Mick?
If I can come in first, and Faye will probably tell me off for this anyway, but just as perhaps as a way forward, picking up the points both the councillors made there, would be around bringing back a report on the progress in relation to the recommendations, as opposed to carrying out a full audit within 2 years, because that would then give us the opportunity to bring back to this committee the progress that we've made against those recommendations. And then if sufficient progress hadn't been made, we could then perhaps carry out another audit. But I think to bring back a report outlining that progress regularly to this committee, I think would be helpful as we move forward, if Faye's agreeable with that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so Ryan, we're at that too.
Well, I think we'll note that in the minutes,
yes.
Chairman, that
Is that okay?
we've had the undertaking from the officers that will happen.
Okay, thank you. Any Alan, your observation?
Yeah, I welcome the audit report, and I think it's great we're making progress on this. I wondered, in terms of the processes we've had processes in place for a while, and how officers feel if these are working well, and And have we had any claims against the authority since we put processes in place, and equal pay as a sort of indicator to how well these processes are working? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah. Right?
Yes, we have no equal pay claims to to date.
So my follow-up really then is, obviously when you put things in place that are good things, that positive changes, these are permanent changes, So we've got good processes at the moment, and I'm just, and I do welcome that we continue to monitor these in terms of performance, and we bring it back to the committee.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that we do spend 20,000 per annum on pay protection, and is it a diminishing return? That's what I'm trying to get at. If we have good processes in place, we put in the audits, flag up some improvements. These are permanent improvements. Hopefully, we're not having any claims. Hopefully, we're in a pretty good place. So I'm just wondering how that 20,000 is spent.
Fine.
Mick might be better to answer this one.
Yeah, I can come in there to help with that. What happened was some years ago we moved, I think it was 2014, we moved from national pay terms and conditions, which was colloquially known as the Green Book, to local terms and conditions, and everybody's roles were evaluated at that particular point. And because the spinal points didn't all align correctly, there were quite a number back then that were put onto an exempt point, and a decision was taken by the executive committee, which was to protect those pay points for a period, because it is a diminishing return. So as people moved on in the organisation, or moved across to other roles, or retired, or left of their own accord, those numbers were diminishing, and they continue to diminish. And it's just that balance of risk, whether there be a greater risk of now unprotecting those protected pay points, or the very slight risk of a potential equal pay claim, of which of course we would always look at those individually should one of those come in from that perspective. But as that sort of risk has existed for sort of 6 or 7 years, it was the decision was taken to continue with that based upon the diminishing return on that. But again, that's something we can look at and bring back at a later date, because it changes sort of by the month really, in that respect. But I don't know the actual numbers of employees left, but it is very few compared to where we were. I don't know, Faye, if you've got the number.
Yes, I do. Even since having this report presented today, we have one fewer on that list. So we've got 22 currently, and it's been identified as low risk to the service. And certainly when the decision was taken in 2013 in that equal pay audit, the decision was through natural wastage, the numbers would just decrease. And it certainly has. I think in the 2013 audit, there was about 60% of the workforce in support staff that were on this exempt pay point. So numbers are decreasing fairly well, and hopefully over the next sort of few years it will be zero. It's that's the hope.
Thank you very much. Ralph.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure everyone is committed to equality and to driving out any sort of discriminatory practices. So it's a real credit to the organisation to undertake an equal pay audit like this. In the current circumstances, with a small organisation, a fairly resource-intensive activity, whilst maintaining business as usual, dealing with COVID, it's quite an achievement to go through this process to confirm that the authority or the fire service is in good order in terms of equal pay. So I'd just like to express our thanks and congratulations to officers for keeping everything going and for doing this piece of work, because it's vital in terms of our commitment to equality and eliminating discrimination and promoting diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Very complimentary. Thank you, Faye. Okay, Grant.
Thank you.
You're going to have to.
Ready for the recommendation?
Yes, you put down a bit about the report. Yeah.
That's going to be noted in the minutes about. an update, a progress report. So the recommendations are on page 153. It'd be noted that the authority is achieving equitable pay between genders and the other protected characteristics of age and race. And secondly, the action plan and recommendations as detailed in Appendix 1 be noted.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Apologies, Chair, I have to go.
Very nice to see you anyway.
Nice to see you. I'm sure it won't change the outcome of any of the further actions, but.
Thank you very much for the contribution. And, have a good day. Have a good day. Thank you. Apprenticeship Programme Annual Statutory Report. I think we've got an officer here now. Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I thought it'd be useful to give a little bit of a background. We will be bringing another paper later on in the year around our whole apprenticeship programme. This primarily is around the annual return that we've done, but I just thought I'd give a brief intro around the apprenticeship schemes as part of that. So in July 2015, the authority approved its apprenticeship programme with its first cohort starting in 2016. The apprenticeship programme continues to support the authority's strategic aims regarding resourcing. Now, this includes effective profiling and forecasting, refreshing the workforce, flexible working, collaboration, supporting equality and diversity through engagement. To date, the authority has enrolled 107 new apprentice starts, and these are across a wide range of the organisation, including operational firefighters, management and leadership, levels 5 and 7, business administration, level 3 and 4, vehicle technician, level 3, cybersecurity technology, level 4, assistant accountant, level 3, human resource, level 3 and 5, and information communication technology, level 3. Not only has this enabled new starters to join the organisation, but also enhanced the authority's strategy for the retention upskilling of existing staff and to develop future leaders and subject matter experts. This also helps to profile, embed and mentor apprenticeship programmes within the organisation. The authority has continued to evolve its apprenticeship proposition, ensuring it is fit for purpose. In 2019, we moved away from our previous apprenticeship provider, which was classed as an ATA, so that was Apprenticeship Training Agency. And now we directly employ all apprentices, ensuring our levy is fully utilised. We are currently reviewing possible options with regards to future apprenticeship recruitment, including forming part of a Thames Valley working group, looking at the possibility of developing a Thames Valley firefighter apprenticeship programme. This takes me on to the paper itself. The report contained within pages 163 to 167 of your packs sets out the authority's annual statutory report against the public sector apprenticeship target for the year ending 31st of March 2021. As part of the government's apprenticeship reform agenda, a public sector target was introduced in 2017, which required all organisations to set a minimum target of 2.3% of new apprenticeship starts for each year. For us, that would equate to approximately 11 based on our headcount, which does vary year on year. For this reporting period, the authority has had 21 new apprentice starts, which exceeds the target. Based on the reporting period to the end of March 21, as set out in Appendix 1, we achieved an average of 4.5% of new apprentice starts per year, which is almost double the national target. With apprenticeships now embedded across the organisation and both support and operational staff, the authority is proud of its apprenticeship programme and not only has a route to employ new staff, but also the upskilling of existing employees and developing future leaders. We are aware of how challenging the past year has been. However, it has also provided an opportunity for us to review the way business as usual has been conducted and evaluate and implement learns to be better prepared for future campaigns. Our apprentices have adapted to working virtually with the respective training providers, which has allowed their progress to continue without the need for a break in learning. The authority had planned to have representation at World Skills UK Live at the NEC and the National Apprenticeship Show at the MK Arena, but unfortunately both were cancelled due to COVID-19 restrictions. The authority is now more experienced and knowledgeable with apprenticeships since taking another cohort of operational firefighters and several support staff members through their endpoint assessments. We have been able to learn from this experience, and by having regular engagement with awarding bodies through the NFCC, and that's the National Fire Chiefs Council Apprenticeship Forum, and be involved in the Operational Firefighter Apprenticeship Standard Review. This has allowed us to impart and share with our apprentices a more rounded appreciation of the processes and what this organisation has to offer as an employer. That concludes my update on the return. I'm more than happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the great report. It's really interesting to hear what we're doing in apprenticeships. I'm a firm believer in apprenticeships and improving opportunities for young people. So I just wonder what the opportunities are for the fire brigade in terms of potentially the Blue Light Hub and cooperation with our partners there. Is there any partnership agreements being looked at in terms of developing joint apprenticeships? And one other question really is, as a measure of success of our apprenticeship schemes, do we envisage we'll have good retention of the people we train up? Because that would be a concern if we trained up people and we didn't retain them. So what's the confidence levels in terms of retention?
So thank you for apologies. Sorry, Chairman.
Carry on.
So in relation to the first question around discussions with partner agencies at the Blue Light Hub, those conversations have already started. Nothing has been agreed or firmed up yet, but I'm very, very confident that the discussions that are taking place with those partners will progress, and they will form part of the discussions that we are now having with our partners, our fire service partners within the Thames Valley, which will fall into the collaboration activity, allowing taking a shared, joint, unified approach to how we recruit, train, develop our staff across not just the Thames Valley, but broader. In relation to the second question around retention, we are finding that we do, like we have done throughout the years, lose one or two staff. But with the apprenticeship scheme, we are not finding that we're losing any more staff than we would have done through any other development framework. I would actually go as far as to say we are, from our experience in the last 5 cohorts, have retained a large number of those staff, as we would expect to do, no different from any other employer.
Okay, any other questions, anybody? Obviously, we're very proud of this system and well, everybody involved. Graham, you want to put the recommendation? Oh, that's a late one, Robin.
No, I was listening intently. Evidently it is good. The apprenticeships going forward. I was the generation which took apprenticeships for being abolished by the government of the day. I think it was 1986 when proper apprenticeships were abolished, and it's been a long road, hasn't it, till we get back to having apprenticeships in this country again. A lot of stumbles on the way, but the authority is showing lead in it, and I'm absolutely sure that when these apprentices are taking lead roles in the authority in the future and management, whatever, they'll look back and say, I only wish they'd put the environment in the risk audit, because we would be in a much better position now to look at those things. And they'll say, where all those chaps have gone which didn't see it as an important
right
thing. But nevertheless, I think that they'll look back at us and say, well, yeah, they were what they were, weren't they? But thank you very much, and I think it's a great report, and I just thought I'd slip that in there for value of the money.
We're taking that as a compliment to this scheme, yes?
Yeah, I thought I'd slip that in there.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, members, the recommendation is at page 163. It is recommended that the authority's annual return attached as Appendix 2 be endorsed for submission to the Department for Education and for publication on the authority's website.
Agreed.
Oh, that's carried. I think
Callum?
Apologies, Chair. I'm just going to add to the previous question as well that one thing we as we run our development centres, and just a point to surface here and the success of the apprenticeship scheme, we have had now apprentices come through our development centres putting themselves forward for promotion, and those apprentices that have done so have performed really well. So again, another example of where this particular scheme is nurturing talent to come through the organisation and be our future leaders. So sorry, it's a late point, but I just wanted to raise that and share that with the authority. Thank you.
Good point. Thanks so much for that. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 16. I believe it's is it Simon? Simon?
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Thank you for your time today. I'm providing the HMIC FRS improvement plan update, and for the benefit of new members, I will provide some background information and context into inspection of fire and rescue services, as well as taking you through the improvement plan. So the legal framework for the inspection of English fire and rescue services was established with the Policing and Crime Act 2017, and the Home Office subsequently awarded a contract to Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, who consequently changed their name to Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services to include the remit of fire. The Inspectorate then developed a framework for inspecting fire and rescue services based in part on the framework they used for inspecting policing, and following consultation with the sector, the inspection framework sets out to grade every fire and rescue service as either outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate. The grade is awarded for 3 areas. These are: how efficient is the FRS in keeping people safe and secure from risk and from fire and other risks? How effective is the FRS at keeping people safe and secure from fire and other risks? And how well does the FRS look after its people? The inspection process involves a self-assessment, regular provision of data, a field visit undertaken by inspectors, an initial feedback session to senior managers, and provision of a graded report which is published in the public domain. Our first inspection took place during the summer of 2019, and following completion of the first inspection round of all 45 fire and rescue services, the Inspectorate published the report into Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service on the 17th of December 2019. The service was judged to require improvement in its efficiency and its effectiveness. The people element was judged as good. Depending on the severity of matters found, the Inspectorate may provide suggested areas for improvement or causes for concern and recommendations. A recommendation will always accompany a cause for concern. The report for this service identifies 11 areas for improvement and 1 cause for concern, accompanied by 2 recommendations. In addition to the Inspectorate framework, the Fire and Rescue Service National Framework document requires fire and rescue services to give due regard to HMIC FRS reports and recommendations. Where recommendations are made, the receiving service is required to prepare, update, and regularly publish an action plan detailing how such recommendations are actioned. At the authority meeting of the 12th of February 2020, it was recommended that the HMIC FRS inspection findings action plan be approved and progress against the action plan be reported regularly to the Overview and Audit Committee. So to take you through the plan, which runs from page 193 to 202 in your pack, in terms of our cause for concern, this was under the efficiency category. The Inspectorate has serious concerns as to whether Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service has the resources it needs to meet its foreseeable risk. As a result of the financial position the service finds itself in, it doesn't have enough operational firefighters to resource its prevention and protection functions and crew the minimum number of fire engines it says it needs. So on page 199 and 200 of your pack, you'll see the Inspectorate recommended that at the earliest opportunity, the service should ensure it has the capacity and capability to support its activity in its public safety plan, and it should consult with the people of Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes on options to have the most effective and efficient response against the financial environment in which it operates. There was also one area for improvement in the efficiency category. The service should use sound financial management to ensure all additional costs such as pensions liability are accounted for and that there is a contingency plan. To address these recommendations, officers adopted a zero-based budget approach when developing the budget proposal for 2020-2021. This approach was developed alongside the new public safety plan. Although our report noted that the Inspectorate would like to see improvements in the year ahead, but without increased funding, it is difficult to see where progress can be made, the zero-based budget approach has identified some key opportunities within the current budgetary constraints. This includes increasing the whole-time establishment by up to 20 firefighters, increasing the protection team by 4 full-time equivalents, and introducing a team leader role and 2 full-time equivalents into the prevention team. We also introduced a head of technology, transformation and portfolio management office to manage the actions required following our inspection report. The 2020 to 2025 Public Safety Plan was approved for public consultation at the authority's September 2009 meeting. The consultation was open for an 8-week period from the 23rd of September to the 18th of November 2019. The plan has since been approved and came into effect from April 1st, 2020. Officers are proceeding with the further development of the strategy proposals set out in the PSP, Public Safety Plan, having regard to the consultation feedback as they are progressed. To address the efficiency area for improvement, the zero-based budgeting approach has ensured that the right amount of money is being spent in the right places. The medium-term financial plan shows 2 scenarios, one with continuation of the pension grant funding and the other showing the impact if it were to cease after 2020 to 2021. Following approval of the Public Safety Plan, a financial strategy has also been developed. This was considered by the Executive Committee in November 2020 and approved by the Fire Authority in December 2020. The strategy included the development of alternative scenarios and contingency plans and further addressed the 2 efficiency recommendations. So moving on to prevention, there are two areas for improvement for prevention, and these are on page 193 and 194 of your pack. And these are that the service should evaluate its prevention work so it understands the benefits better, and the service should understand the reasons for its reducing number of prevention visits and consider how it can better target those who are most at risk to fire. To address these areas for improvement, an evaluation of prevention activity commenced in July 2020, separated by work stream. The initial phase included fire and wellness visits, road safety, youth engagement and safeguarding, with the completion of the remaining phase of the evaluation being placed on hold to facilitate work on COVID. An evaluation of the fire and wellness visits has been completed and is being used to inform a targeted programme of knowledge acquisition for operational staff. Service delivery area profiles have been developed and launched to all 9 service delivery areas. We are benchmarking between service areas and against national data and addressing priority prevention objectives bespoke to service area requirements. We've seen an increased shift to referral-led prevention visits, which has been implemented from April 2019 to utilise service resources more effectively. And the administration teams who were responsible for screening and booking our fire and wellness visits have been recruited back to full establishment. Funding agreed by the authority to establish a number of new prevention posts is helping to oversee and deliver fire and wellness visits in specific buildings. This additional capacity will address the volume of prevention visits in identified areas of increased risk, including the delivery of a programme of high-rise interventions and engagement with the occupants of specialised housing. These new posts have been filled with a team leader and 2 technician roles. The prevention evaluation is now integral to driving the prevention agenda forward, addressing evaluation findings, scrutinising all staff work streams and the capacity to deliver. Post-incident intervention is also being reinvigorated. In terms of protection, there are 3 areas for improvement. These are on page 194 to 197 of the pack, and these are the service should ensure it allocates enough resources to a prioritised and risk-based inspection programme. The service should review its response to false alarms and ensure operational resources are used effectively. And the service should ensure it works with local businesses and large organisations to share information and expectations on compliance with fire safety regulations. Following the authority's approval of a significant protection growth bid in February 2020, we have now recruited into all the posts, including a newly created apprentice fire safety role. We also reviewed the department structure to ensure the required resources are available in the correct locations based on the risk profile for each area. This resulted in the creation of lead teams and references in specialised areas such as enforcement and prosecution, specialised housing and high-risk residential buildings. 3 of the new posts have been filled with support staff and appropriate training is nearing completion. The 4th manager post has been redesignated through internal role movements as an operational post, and this increases the out-of-hours protection cover for undertaking emergency enforcement action and at operational incidents. The high-risk residential building team are focusing on the delivery of the building risk review programme and supporting the review and development of new risk-based inspection programme methodology. The development of the new methodology and its piloting was delayed by the pandemic, but is now progressing. A range of approaches are being developed to engage with premises that aren't highest risk. This will include business engagement, workshops, seminars, thematic reviews conducted by our response crews. And an evaluation of the policy on automatic fire alarms commenced in July 2020 as part of a collaborative project with Oxfordshire and Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Services. Due to COVID-19 pressures, the 3 service approach has been paused. However, work in this service continues. And the evaluation is considering 2 linked areas, the response to automatic fire alarms and unwanted fire signals. We're identifying the cost and value to all stakeholders from Buckinghamshire attending all automatic fire alarms. On completion of this evaluation, an options paper will be taken to the Fire Authority for decision. The current unwanted fire signals officer post and processes are also being evaluated as we recognise it's a good time to review this area. Response crews are also undergoing protection training, which will improve their knowledge of the built environment and expectations of basic fire safety measures and management. This will also enable them to undertake fire safety engagement and thematic reviews at lower risk premises. Although these lower level activities will not be counted as audits for the purposes of reporting to the Home Office, they will assist in identifying non-compliance, improving knowledge and keeping people safe. Home Office grant funding is also being used to boost capacity to focus on business engagement. In terms of business engagement, activity has increased in this area in a time where physical engagement has been severely restricted. We have used website and social media activity, press releases, radio interviews, Milton Keynes Open University induction programme and a care home virtual seminar as examples. We are also developing the website to consider self-assessment targets, lower risk premises, an app, web-based alert system and public referrals for communities or business fire safety advice and support. In terms of response, there were 2 areas for improvement. The service should ensure it has a sustainable system to provide its operational response model, and the service should improve the availability of its on-call fire engines to respond to incidents. In response to these areas for improvement, we commenced work to further improve availability of appliances, following a review of the resourcing model. The introduction of new on-call contracts has led to new employment proposition for staff, which in turn provides greater resilience. Total staffing numbers do remain low, but the additional 20 additional firefighters added to the establishment following successful growth bids in 2020 has assisted. The resource management team is currently being restructured to provide more capacity within the team, and Fire Service Rota, which is the system we use to resource the service's assets, continues to be developed to predict and plan more effectively. A recent development is the full integration between Fire Service Rota and our Vision system, which is our mobilising system, which now enables on-call firefighters to make themselves available for not only their closest appliance providing immediate cover, but also other appliances on a tiered availability basis. This improves our resilience capabilities. On-call awareness sessions have been improved and delivered online. This has seen an increase in on-call applications, and a new on-call contract was introduced, which created 4 availability options. This ranged from immediate response through 20 minutes, 60 minutes, and a 3-hour response to mobilising. This again is the aim to improve our resilience. Moving on to the final pillar of our people. In terms of the people element, there were 3 areas for improvement. These are on page 201 and 202 of your pack. The service should put in place an achievable succession plan for the whole organisation, and the service should plan to be more ambitious in its efforts to attract a more diverse workforce, which better reflects the communities it serves. And the service should put in place an open and fair process to identify, develop, support high potential staff and aspiring leaders. Progress has been made to ensure workforce and succession planning processes are in place. The ED&I group, or the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion group, is well established. They meet monthly to progress the short and longer term objectives. The objectives went to the authority on the 16th of June 2021, and they provide an update on progress to date, EDI headlines and work streams, and EDI workforce data. The objectives have been reviewed and extended to reflect the amount of work being carried out in regard to ED&I. And they are reflective of the Inspectorate's recommendations. The Recruitment Oversight Board meets on a regular basis, and the end-to-end process has been mapped out and further meetings are planned, and our talent management programme continues to replenish development pools at each level required. Our promotional process has been reviewed and brought into one operational promotion procedure, and following a pilot, we are progressing a new leadership and management development framework to support and assist with the development of newly recruited or promoted managers. All employees also have an annual appraisal where their commitment to their behaviours linked to the authority's values is an essential element, and this is quality assured to identify themes and to assist with training requirements. So in summary, the plan is being progressed through a range of improvement work streams. The main reasons for some of the themes being marked as amber is due to slow progress owing to the pandemic and due to the ongoing financial position the service is in. In terms of COVID, we've not only been restricted by lockdowns and not being able to face the community in the normal way we would, but also because we have taken the choice to support the community in different ways to ensure we play an active role in responding to the pandemic. For example, the 4 mass vaccination centres, the test and trace support, the delivery of food and essential items to vulnerable people, the training delivered to care staff in the use of PPE, surge testing, and assisting South Central Ambulance Service through seconding emergency response drivers are all examples that will have had an impact against the progress of this plan. Nonetheless, the programme remains strong and we will continue to work against these improvement themes, and we look forward to receiving the latest report from the second round of inspections, which are due to be published in the winter. This concludes the update on the existing plan. I apologise, it was a long plan, but I did want to take the new members through it in a bit more detail. I'll stop here for any questions, and I can also offer a verbal update on our most recent inspection if the committee would like to hear it. Thank you.
Any questions? Bill?
Yes, thanks, Simon. That was a very detailed report regarding the Inspectorate. The Inspectorate, when it writes this report, obviously sends a copy of this to the Home Office. They've come up with quite a menu of extra costs within their report, which we see itemised on page 199. To bring in 24 plus people cost money. Have we a figure for the extra costs that the Inspectorate recommended? Have we got a figure that it actually alludes to in money as to his wishes? And has the Home Office come up with the money to cover that extra cost? If not, then in the danger of teaching granny to suck eggs, this is another string to your bow when you're lobbying MPs, etc., for more finance. So have we got actual financial figures?
Thank you for that question, Councillor. That's a really good question. I can see that Mick has come up on the screen. I didn't know if he wanted to take that question directly.
I'm happy to come in on that one, Simon, if you want me to, but just in answer to that sort of direct question, Councillor, no is the answer. The HMI obviously in their cause for concern said that they saw it very difficult how we would be able to improve without any additional funding. Obviously, we did use this as a lever and some leverage within our correspondence with both the Home Office and and our lobbying tactics to assist in that perspective. But no, there was no additional funding or a number that was identified. What we managed to do, and Mark will probably be able to help me a bit more here as well, we managed to, through our zero-based budgeting and through a reallocation of kind of internal budgets, looking at our on-call and traditional underspends in that respect, and reallocate some funding for those 20 additional firefighters and the other protection and prevention posts that went through member challenge at the end of last year. We managed to sort of identify some monies to be able to invest in that area, but of course that always comes at the expense of other things and having to work slightly differently. But just in respect of was there numbers identified? They weren't. But as Mark Hemming, as our Director of Finance, has already said, he's now one of the leads on the National Fire Chiefs Council for Finance, and I've just seen him pop up. So I'll allow Mark to come in and probably be far more eloquent than I when talking about the numbers and the money.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. Just to be clear, the actions we took there weren't kind of mandated by HMI. HMI said, oh, you need to ensure you've got the capacity, but they didn't say how you should do it. So what we've done there in terms of the 20 firefighters, extra protection staff, etc., are what we identified as what we'd like to do to address some of that action. And as Mick and Simon have said, we kind of looked at a zero-based budget approach, which rather than increasing or decreasing each budget line incrementally, we took a fundamental review of everything we spend, where we spend it, which allowed us to add those additional resources within existing financial envelope. What it did also do is part of the kind of bid for additional funding for resources internally was we said we wanted to go from 260 to 290, but we can only afford 280. We would still like to put in an additional 10 or 20 whole-time firefighters to give us that additional resilience, but we just don't have the funding to do that at the moment, and that is part of our ask of Home Offices in relation to HMIC cause of concern. We can't fully release this cause of concern at the moment because we still think we need a few more staff just to give us that additional resilience that we need to give us a sustainable kind of financial future.
Can I just come back?
Yeah.
I think the point I'm trying to make is it would do no harm to put a figure together of what the recommendations of the inspectorate has come up with, so that you can use that figure readily whenever we are talking, even us as members see MPs quite often. And if we could have said, well, you do realise there's 300,000 or whatever that figure is, recommendation from the inspectorate, we have something to lobby about. So I would benefit, I don't know about others, but I would benefit from knowing financially what the recommendations of the inspectorate actually accrue to.
Okay. Good point.
Yes, no, thank you for that point, Councillor. I've made a note of it, and I think it's definitely something that we can look at and we can explore.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Robin.
Just brief. You cited the earlier in your address, which was a long time ago, the very good address, as already been said, about high-rise buildings, stroke, system search, what we're going to do. It's evident, isn't it, that Glenford Tower was a long time ago, and nothing's really come forward in support for local authorities to address those things, and they will be a continued challenge to all authorities and government planning legislation doesn't preclude, in fact encourages the changing of buildings, which perhaps wouldn't have been changed before. So I think we do need to look at that separately, maybe just note that today, because I think that's going to be a challenge as going forward when the planning white paper comes through, and if it, all of what they're suggesting becomes reality, we may have a lot more buildings which need fire inspection and a lot more things doing that, because the regulations have been somewhat diluted and weakened. Wasn't very short, was it? But it was much enjoyable and true. So I think we need to actually bring something back about that, because I can't quantify the risk, I haven't got the information, and I think we do need to look at that, because it is a risk to the authority in our service delivery.
Any comment on that?
No, thank you very much for that comment. Yes, it is a separate issue. Right? It's linked, but it's just one of those strands into our general improvement. We can't forget that we've got sight on the Grenfell Tower inquiry recommendations as well, and there's a lot of work that's going on, which I reported through to the March O&A in terms of Grenfell Tower. They are linked, but it all kind of feeds into our improvement model.
Okay, Mick, a comment?
It was just really to echo what Simon said there. We have sort of brought papers in the past to the authority around the Grenfell Tower Phase 1 recommendations and the recent Fire Safety Act and the current Building Safety Bill that's making its way through Parliament. And we will continue to update members on that. But we're taking almost like a twin track approach on that, because they're very much linked, but there are the protection elements, as in the fire safety of the buildings and how we address those concerns and how we engage with responsible persons and building owners and managers. And then there are obviously the operational elements about how we respond to buildings above 18 metres and indeed above 11 metres, depending on the type of construction, etc. And how that links back to our public safety plan as well. So there is an awful lot of work going on around that, and we will keep members updated on our progress. And again, we have received some specific grants from government in relation to specific Grenfell recommendation work and the Building Safety Bill and Fire Safety Act. So yeah, again, we can keep members well appraised of those areas as we progress through.
Okay, Simon, you did mention previously about going over present work, what's going forward. Did you say that to give some more updates?
Yes, I can. If you've got time and you're happy, Chair, I can give you a quick update, just a little bit of verbal update on the current inspection that we've had.
It's important for new members.
Yeah, okay, right. So the second round of inspections of all 44 fire and rescue services, and that's 44 since Hampshire and the Isle of Wight merged in 2021, has now recommenced. We have been inspected again recently as part of the Tranche 1 schedule, with our inspection taking place virtually between the 24th of May and the 5th of July. So the inspection framework is very similar to the previous round, with a focus on the service's effectiveness, efficiency and how it treats its people. Their key focus is also on the progress we have made since our last full inspection. So the exception to the virtual theme was that the strategic brief and the authority chairman's interview was delivered to HMI Matt Parr and service liaison lead Catherine Richardson in person at the Blue Light Hub on the 3rd of June. And that was done with COVID secure controls in place. And the strategic briefing focused on the way that the authority has enabled us to build capacity in the key areas of the service to address the key recommendations and the cause for concern from our round 1 inspection report. So I mentioned it was over 6 weeks. So in total, there were 65 sessions scheduled over the whole period, ranging from interviews, briefings and walkthroughs, focus groups, desktop reviews and reality testing sessions. There was also a staff survey which was open from the start of the inspection until the 14th of June. So there isn't a clear date regarding when the Tranche 1 inspection reports will be published, but the indication is this will be in the winter of this year. So we look forward to receiving the report and considering the findings into our existing specific improvement plan, and we will bring this through to this committee. The other thing that's been mentioned a little bit today is around the COVID inspection that we had in between then. So you may be aware that we were inspected in November 2020 with a thematic inspection to look at our COVID-19 preparations. So the inspectorate initially suspended all their inspections because of the pandemic, but following a commission by the Home Secretary in the summer of 2020, they announced a national review of fire and rescue service COVID-19 preparations. The results of our COVID-19 inspection were published on the 22nd of January 2021, and the inspectorate concluded that we responded well during the pandemic and provided additional support to its community. It went on to say that we used whole-time and on-call firefighters to respond to emergencies. Staff supported the service's partners, especially the local ambulance trust, and this meant that people of Buckinghamshire were well supported through the pandemic. It's worth noting that this inspection report only covers the initial period of the pandemic and didn't capture all the work that we've done since then, primarily in regard to assisting with establishing the 4 mass vaccination centres across Buckinghamshire, Milton Keynes, and assisting with surge testing where required, and continued support to the test and trace. So we've had those 2 inspections since this action plan, and we look forward to bringing those into this committee in the future. That was the kind of the verbal update on our recent activity with HMI. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Okay, I believe we can give the recommendation.
Yeah, take
and then finally we've got one more item, number 10.
That's right, yeah. We'll take you to the recommendations at page 184. At page 189.
189.
That the committee notes current progress against the HMI CFRS/BFRS improvement plan.
Great.
That's carried.
I'll finally go back to obviously item 10. Who's going to take us through this? Neil, we got him on the line.
Yeah, Neil Harris and
Hello, Neil.
Kenneth as well as on.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. For new, I appreciate hearing some of the other discussions there on new members of the committee. So just by way of introduction, my name's Neil Harris. I am an associate partner in EY's Government and Public Sector Assurance team, and I'm the key audit partner for the audit of the Fire and Rescue Authority. EY have been the auditors of the Fire and Rescue Authority for a number of years, but this is my second year as the key audit partner. And what you have in your agenda papers today is our audit planning document setting out our approach to the audit of the Council's financial statements, the Fire and Rescue Authority's financial statements for the financial year ended 31st of March 2021, and also the work we're required to do under the National Audit Office's Code of Audit Practice to examine the Fire and Rescue Authority's arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources, which is changing this year to represent a value for money commentary under the National Audit Office's Code of Audit Practice. I won't go through the audit plan page by page. I'll just draw attention to the key areas of focus and also an update for you on the proposed timetable for our external audit work this year. So on the overview of our audit strategy, we've identified areas that drive significant audit risks for the review of the financial statements, and also those other areas of focus that are driving our audit procedures this year. And just to summarise those, we've identified from our audit procedures in terms of the risk of management override and also any risk of fraud in revenue recognition, that the inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure given the size of the Fire and Rescue Authority's capital programme means that that is an area where we will be undertaking audit testing to a lower threshold and undertaking specific inquiries through our journal's work around that particular area of risk. That is consistent with our assessment in the prior years, and so there should be nothing that's unusual for those that have seen our audit strategy for the Fire and Rescue Authority before. What's not in our audit plan, and we will circulate a final version of this, and apologies for the oversight here, is that there are mandatory procedures that we're required to undertake on the management override of controls, and those relate to the inquiries of management, inquiries of yourselves as those charged with governance, also to look at unusual transactions that have taken place in the year, management bias on any particular transactions and judgments, and mandatory procedures looking at journal entry testing throughout the year and at year end. So we will make sure that commentary is added into the relevant sections of the audit plan after this meeting and circulate that back for the website and the final papers as a final version. It doesn't substantively change what's contained within the document, but we should have included that in there, so I thought I'd verbally set that out now. What's new, I think, this year for the Fire and Rescue Authority plan is the recognition of the valuation of the Blue Light Hub. In the prior year, this was an asset under construction. We looked at the value for money arrangements associated with the decision making, the exposure in terms of financial loss and ongoing impact on financial sustainability associated with the Blue Light Hub. Now that is operational, there needs to be a valuation under properly recognised valuation practices and standards that's then recognised in the financial statements. And because this will be a significant asset that's recognised in the accounts declassification and valuation assumptions associated with the Blue Light Hub, are ones that I think represent a significant audit risk of material misstatement, either because of the level of estimation and uncertainty and subjectivity in that valuation. And for that reason, we've identified it as a significant risk, and we'll be involving colleagues in our real estate team to support us to review the work of your valuer and the assumptions contained within that valuation. We have downgraded our assessment of risks associated with the rest of your asset base. So last year we increased our risk on the valuation of assets to a significant risk to reflect the impact of COVID-19 on estimation uncertainty with valuations. What's become clear since is that that estimation and uncertainty is largely now being removed from valuers in their valuation reports. But equally, we still see the valuation uncertainty more to do with those assets that are valued at fair value, those that are subject to market volatility post-COVID-19, those assets that are more specialised in nature and valued at depreciated replacement cost, which, aside from the blue light hub, largely that is contained within your asset base. We don't see the same level of risk this year, and therefore we'll be performing our audit procedures more consistent with an inherent audit risk now around valuations. The work we needed to perform in light of COVID-19 on the appropriateness of going concern disclosures, looking 12 months forward from the date that the accounts are authorised for issue, still remain appropriate this year, and actually have been driven by changes in auditing standards as well on the work that auditors should undertake to review the appropriateness of going concern disclosures and to assess and to review management's assessments. Though I think the work that that Mark and his team did last year to produce a comprehensive disclosure, if that is followed suit again for this year, then I don't foresee any particular difficulties with that work. And my starting assumption is there is a low risk of any material uncertainties on the continuity of service provision, which is the key test for public sector entities on going concern. There are some changes in auditing standards this year associated with accounting estimates, where we look at every single estimate that management produce in terms of the financial statements, whether that represents a low or a high risk. For fire and rescue authorities, I don't think that's going to lead to significant changes in our audit approach. It probably will still lead to the same level of risk and of risks associated with the valuation of assets and the net pension liabilities, both for the local government pension scheme and the firefighters pension scheme, which we've always traditionally had as a higher inherent risk. And but it does capture any other estimation techniques associated with accruals, but impairment of receivables, where we will continue just to look at what's in the draft accounts and any other judgments taken by management in those financial statements. Our materiality level is based on 2% of gross expenditure. So you'll see in the plan that our planning materiality is 884,000. And that's consistent with our view of yourselves as an organisation, your relative stability financially, no significant matters in the public domain or having a higher public profile, no significant structural changes that we are aware of. And we also set what's called a performance materiality that drives our level of audit testing on the core financial statements. At a level of either 50% or 75% of that level, we've set our performance materiality at the higher end of the range, which is 75% at 663,000, and that is to recognise again that you've got a good control environment for producing good quality financial statements. We've had limited errors arising from our audit in the prior years, and we're not aware of any significant changes in systems, personnel, or any weaknesses in your control environment, either from our inquiries or considering the work of your internal auditors. And so that is keeping that level at 75%. Our value for money work is still in progress at the moment. The work we are doing this year responds to changes in the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice, and that is encouraging auditors to do more work just to make sure we've got a consistent understanding of your arrangements of financial sustainability, governance, and other wider areas such as procurement and contract management, and with a view to determine are there any areas within your arrangements that represent a risk of significant weakness. Typically, I think for fire and rescue authorities, we'd be focusing on your financial resilience and making sure that though we do not have any concerns on your future budget and medium-term financial plan, and determining our response to that, and any further other decisions that have required a due diligence or separate specialist and work and involvement, and looking at the governance arrangements for any key decisions taken in the year. I'm not aware of anything as significant as the blue light hub that we undertook in the prior year, but we will update our knowledge on that. We will report back to you on the outcome of our work on the value for money arrangements, and as I said in my introduction, at the beginning of my introduction, there is now a requirement for auditors to produce a narrative commentary on their findings on value for money arrangements, which we will produce in an annual audit report at the conclusion of our external audit later this year. So just before I close, I wanted to discuss the audit timetable, and I've had discussions with Mark and his finance team on a couple of occasions recently, and I think it's worth just setting out the context that we find ourselves in at the moment. So chief financial officers and through chairs of audit committees would have received a national letter from EY at the beginning of June setting out the backdrop for how we're scheduling our audits for the 2021 financial year and how we're safeguarding our professional standards and the high standards of audit quality you would expect from us. Where we are currently is there are still just under 40 organisations where we've not concluded 1920 audits for a variety of reasons, largely because of the complexities arising from COVID-19 and the ongoing impact that has on audit procedures. But there is still a quantum of work to conclude for 1920. We have seen some slippages and delays on NHS and pre-recess central government audits as well this year. And the Public Accounts Committee have been making inquiries and produced a report last week looking into the timeliness of audit opinions and what action MHCLG and others need to take to bring greater stability into the public audit system at the moment. That follows reviews from the National Audit Office as well. So this isn't just a sustainability and stability issue impacting on just EY, it's across the public audit regime at the moment. And in response to that, as a firm, our approach for scheduling our audits this year is to ensure we can get as many of the audits that are above the HM Treasury and whole of government accounts threshold to enable the whole of government accounts process not to be significantly delayed. And therefore, for audits before the end of September, we are prioritising those audits above the whole of government accounts threshold, which would typically capture your county councils, your unitary authorities, London boroughs. It also would capture pension funds because of the assurances that are required from that work to inform letters of assurance that are provided to admitted body auditors. So the implication of that is that I've had some difficult conversations with Mark and his team about what does that mean for the scheduling of the Fire and Rescue Authority audit. I originally had a discussion that started with undertaking our audit towards the end of November with a view that we'd be concluded by Christmas, and there might be a need for an extraordinary audit committee to receive our audit results report. We have been able to bring our resourcing and scheduling timetable forward, and we are proposing to undertake our external audit of your financial statements from week commencing the 13th of September for a period of 5 weeks. Yeah, the date of this meeting, that resourcing and scheduling is in place, and that is currently what we're working to. But I have agreed with Mark that we would continue to talk between now and then in terms of whether we are seeing any slippage on the work that's been undertaken in this particular period, and whether that could have a knock on to the timetable for your audit and whether or not that might need to move back. But in the event that we are able to start in mid-September, we won't be able to conclude our audit by the end of September, but we will. But the anticipation is that we'll be able to meet your committee cycle to take an audit results report and enable conclusion of the external audit before the end of this calendar year, which is our general principle and intention for the work that we do across all of our public sector audits this year within EY. Obviously, I'm happy to take any questions on that position. I've offered to Mark to join a meeting of the Fire Finance Network and generally provide briefings to national stakeholders in the fire sector about the position that we're in with the timeliness of external audit opinions and what steps are being taken to rectify those matters over the next year or two to fit in with the wider reviews undertaken by Sir Tony Redmond and the Public Accounts Committee. And I'm obviously happy to continue to keep this committee up to date on all of that work and what does that mean for the scheduling of your audits now and in the future. But I think with that introduction to our audit plan, I will pause, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions at all?
No.
No? No questions?
Okay.
Right.
We'll move to the recommendation.
Yes.
Chairman and members. It's
very well explained.
Recommendation is on page 45, and that is that the report that annexed A sets out the plan of activity for the authority auditors Ernst & Young for the financial year. Oh, sorry, that's the executive summary. So the recommendation,
very short.
Yeah, the recommendation, do apologise. The recommendation is that the audit plan for 2020-21 Annex A be noted. Do apologise.
Agree?
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's still there.
He is still there.
Yeah, it's all still there.
Well presented.
It was very well. Okay, item 17, forward plan. Graham, any observations on that one?
Only to say, just probably, and Mark might want to comment, just attach the caveat on the adoption of the statement of accounts. I was in the forward plan for November, but you've obviously heard what the external auditors had to say about that. Do you have any comments, Mark, on the forward plan in respect of that?
No, I need to echo what you've said, Graham, and what Neil articulated when he updated us on the audit, is we'll work towards trying to bring something to the committee in November, but depending on timescales, it may be that we have to take it to either the FAR Authority in December or our March meeting of the ONA the following year.
Okay, for that, Mark. Happy with that, everybody?
Great.
So that's just a note.
We're noting that. Okay, and the next meeting is the November the 5th, has been said. Can I just thank you again? This is a very in-depth, challenging committee, justly so. And can I thank everybody for their support today and contributions? It's been great. Thank you very much.
Okay. And we're just going to terminate the broadcast.